Welcome back to the Orthodox Ethos. I'm Father Peter here, and tonight we have a special treat, a special guest tonight from the Petru Voda monastery in Romania, and that is Father Filotheu Bălan. He'll be joining us shortly. We have a pre-recorded interview that we're going to share with you, and of course, we're looking forward to your questions. So stay tuned tonight for all about Saint Paisius Velichkovsky. Well, if you have had any time to spend deep diving into the Orthodox cloud of witnesses in the last few hundred years, and you've spent time following the writings of Father Seraphim Rose, among others, you'll know that St. Paisius Velichkovsky, unknown to many people today, especially outside of the Orthodox Church, is a towering figure of importance, patristic importance for the entire Orthodox Church, but especially for the Slavic world, because he was the conduit, he was the path for a Philokaleic Renaissance in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And really, for the entire Orthodox Church, immediately in the 60 to 80 years after his repose, his impact was enormous. And we're going to talk in tonight's interview with Father Filotheu. You'll hear how important and how connected St. Paisius was to other contemporary saints who are equally magnificent and great for the Orthodox Church in the 18th and early 19th century, but mainly the 18th century, and that is St. Nicodemus, the Hagurite, and St. Athanasius of Paros. And we're so grateful to God that by his providence, Uncut Mountain Press has been blessed by the work of many people, including the translators first and foremost, to bring to the English-speaking world the writings of St. Nicodemus, 3 volumes so far, and we will soon be bringing more Colivadi fathers to press. And so that's why we've always been extremely interested in the person and place of St. Paisius Velichkovsky. Now, if you don't know much about him and you haven't read his life, I don't know if this is still in circulation. I don't think it is, but maybe you can find an old copy. This is one of the best books in English about the saint, Blessed Paisius Velichkovsky, the man behind the Philokalia, and it was produced by the St. Herman Brotherhood, and it is a life written by Father Seraphim Rose, essentially, or translated by Father Seraphim Rose with a lots of commentary. He's got a big introduction, and this is just one of several important texts by or about St. Paisius. Tonight, the reason why we wanted to talk to Father Filotheu was because we met him, first of all, about 2 years ago when we were in Romania, and we visited Petru Voda, and I had the opportunity to sit down and talk to him and get to know him. And then we've been talking ever since. He came to our conference. In Alabama on the 8th Ecumenical Council, spoke at it, spoke about things that he had researched, because he's a tremendous researcher and historian of Orthodox Church history. And he presented on the examples and the history with regard to the adoption, very slow and painful and long, of the Filioque in the West, and that in fact, in the 8th, 9th, and 10th and 11th centuries, many in the West did not adopt the Filioque. This is a misunderstanding, a kind of a general kind of propaganda, or a very generalization of things on the part of mainly the Roman Catholic historians. But in fact, there are many examples, even after the adoption in Rome, of Orthodox in the West, all the way through the 11th century, refusing or just not adopting the Filioque. And so he presented on that at our conference on the 8th Ecumenical Council. And there's a lot of little gems in tonight's conversation. We did this conversation a few hours ago. A lot of little gems that anybody who's interested in the question of the so-called Western captivity, the question of the Ecumenical Council, the question of reception of converts, baptism, the identity of the church, unionism, the history of St. Paisius, of course, his life and his relationship with the saints and others in the church, in the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and with regard to Russia. A lot of wonderful little historical nuggets that comes out in our conversation. So I can't urge you enough to take time to get to know St. Paisius. Of course, he's known, but throughout the whole Orthodox world, of course, for his great offering of bringing the patristic, niptic fathers into the Slavonic. Of course, he was from Poltava. He was from Ukraine, and he studied in Kiev for a short time, but he left kind of disgusted by, he left in part because of the Latinization of academic theology, but also for other reasons at the time, problems that the church was facing there. Came to Romania, as you'll hear, went to Athos, of course. A massive brotherhood was formed, and then even bigger one in Romania when he returns. And what he's known for is that the work he did with all of his brotherhood to translate or update translations, correct and republish translations of what we know today as the Philokalia, but it's basically the corpus, the collection of the patristic writings going back over a millennium before him, on the hesychastic life, the way of the prayer of the heart, the Jesus prayer, and the whole ascetic life in the Orthodox Church. But, and this is what will come out in tonight's conversation, there's much more, and the more and interesting that we forget about, we don't talk about very much, and that is his response to the very problematic and disruptive unionism that came in during the 18th century in Transylvania, and he answers for us today, which we need these answers. How should the Orthodox respond to not only the Uniates but the Latins and Western heterodox mysteries, people who've come from that? How should they be received? These kind of questions he's dealing with. A lot of people don't know that. But also, he's caring a lot about the church, the pastoral and apologetic side of things. And so that's what we're excited about bringing to bear here. And not just, he's interested not just in the narrow confines of the monastery and the prayer of the heart, but he's interested in the whole life of the church, as is every saint. And so, without further ado, I'm going to play the pre-recorded interview with Father Filotheu. We'll come back afterwards, of course, to say a few more words before we open it up to your questions. If you would like to ask questions, and I hope you do, you put it in all caps questions here in YouTube. If you're over on X, pop over in YouTube and submit a question. Occasionally we come over and see if there are any questions over on X. Usually there are not. It's just a kind of a clunky way of doing it, but hopefully you can do that. If you're over in Crowdcast, you can ask questions. I think everybody knows how to do that there. So let's start with our interview. Here we go. Welcome to the Orthodox Ethos podcast, Father Filotheu. It's very good to have you and to see you again after, about a year and a half, or maybe it's even longer since I was in Romania with you. How are you doing?
Glory to God. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Let's hope it will be a useful evening.
Amen.
Or a useful interview, and useful discussion podcast, if I may call it. Amen.
Father Filotheu is a monk of the monastery of Petru Voda, and he is a scholar, and in particular, his work with St. Paisius of Velichkovsky is what is of great interest to us as lovers of St. Paisius and his whole inheritance. And when we met with you, Father Filotheu, now going back, or whatever it is, a year and a half ago, and maybe I've lost track of time, it's maybe 2 years ago, I forget. And in Romania, we talked and we went to Neamtz and we saw the library there and some of the old works of St. Paisius. And we talked at length about that period, that time period, which is of great interest to us at Orthodox Ethos. We're, as I've told you, we're, of course, publishers of the works of St. Nicodemus. We're going to be publishing the works of St. Paisius, St. Athanasius of Paros. And we would be very grateful to God if we could be somehow involved in the works of St. Paisius coming into English in the near future. But we're very interested in St. Paisius' views on those very important issues at those times the church was facing, already in many ways well into the impacts of what Father George Velichkovsky and others and St. Hilarion Trotsky say regard as a Western captivity of our theology in terms of our academic theology. Clearly not our theology as a whole, but our academic theology. But maybe we can begin, first of all, before we get into those amazing, interesting details of the text and of the history, tell us just a few words about yourself so our listeners can know you better. That we're not asking you to, go into great detail, but just tell us a bit. And then let's talk about the life of St. Paisius a little bit, and then we'll go into the more details. Is that okay?
Yes, sure. Absolutely. I'm a monk in one of the many Orthodox monasteries in Romania. I entered monastic life in 1996 as a disciple of Father Filotheu Bălan. Also, Father, now canonized, Cleopa Ilie from Hesychast Monastery, who is well known to the Orthodox Church. His books were translated into Greek and English language, starting with the 80s in the last century. So that was my calling. I mean, our Lord and our Most Holy Theotokos wanted me to embrace monastic life there. And Father Ioanichie, right after I entered the monastery, sent me to the library of Romanian Academy in Bucharest, which has the largest collection of monastic manuscripts here in Romania, almost 3,000 monastic manuscripts in Romanian language, particular Romanian language, because there are some other thousands of Greek and Slavonic languages. And he wanted me to find unedited writings of St. Paisius. So this is where the moment when I discovered his teachings, his writings, his inheritance to us. And this is how I started to work on this treasure of unknown jewelries and pearls for the Orthodox Church. And this effort was successful. I mean, in 1998 and 1999, together with a professor from Chisinau, from the so-called Republic of Moldavia today. Her name was Valentina Pelin. She reposed in 2007, I think. Together with her, we published the unedited letters and the writings of St. Paisius for the first time in Romanian language. Some scholars knew about them, knew that these existed, but no one took the endeavor to publish them. So this is how I started with this fascinating milieu of monastic life from the second half of the 18th century. This is how I came in contact with their struggles, with their wars. I mean, when I say were, I'm thinking about the apologetic side of their life and writings. We should know something about the context. I mean, Saint Paisius was born in nowadays Ukraine, in Poltava, in 1722, and in that time, Poltava and that side of Ukraine was under a Russian empire, and also Kiev. But some miles from Kiev started the Polish kingdom, Polish-Lithuanian kingdom, where Orthodoxy was kind of tolerated. I mean, there was a false peace in Brest-Litovsk in 1596, where Romano-Catholics came with this solution of inventing Greek Catholicism, and forced many of the Orthodox Christians in nowadays Ukraine, and those times it was a Polish kingdom, forced them to embrace this heresy, I could call it. And this is how, up to our days, the Ukrainian communities are split in two: Orthodox and Uniats. So Uniatism appeared in that era after the end of 16th century. So from this point of view, the Romanian principalities, Moldavia, Wallachia, even Transylvania, were kind of heaven for anyone, because they were protected, and into the words of Saint Paisius, they were blessed. And the last, he's writing 2 times. He's writing this. These are the last countries in the whole world where Orthodoxy could blossom, could live its own life. This is why.
Go ahead.
This is why, starting with 1739, when he met the former metropolitan of Moldavia, that was forced to run away from Turkish hegemony into the Russian lands, he fell in love with Romanian language and Byzantine music. We call it Psaltic music. And this is when everything from this side of the world reached to his young heart. In those years, he was a student in the Spiritual Academy of Kiev. And he was learning Greek and Latin, but he had a kind of frustration on this subject, because they were learning Greek and Latin on non-Christian writings. I mean, they were reading Plato, Aristotle from the Greek world, and Cicero and some other writers from the Latin world into the original languages. And this is why very shortly he decided to run away from Ukraine, from Kiev, and to come to Moldavia and to embrace the monastic life here. Knowing very well that many monks from Ukraine started to run to Moldavia after the anti-monastic reforms of Tsar Peter I, so-called the Great, Peter the Great. So they came as to take refuge in Romanian principalities. One very one well-known example of such monastics was Saint Basil of Poiana-Mărului, who was a Ukrainian monk that came here around, I don't know, 1724, 25 or something. And he wanted to live a monastic life according to the rules of Saint Nilus Sorsky, who wrote his monastic testament at the beginning of the 16th century in Russia, and he was kind of persecuted for his writing. And who is the real author of Philokalia? Because into his writings, into his testament, we may find the list of all the Philokalic authors. You're
talking about Basil or Saint Nilus?
Basil from Poiana-Mărului. So, if anyone was asking, where do they have the list of the authors that wrote about hesychasm and prayer and spiritual life, the whole list is in the testament of Saint Basil from Poiana-Mărului.
Had he spent time on Athos, or did he come directly from Ukraine to Romania and in Romania discover all of these writings?
No, he had access to the Slavonic translations of these Hesychast authors from the 14th century. These translations were made in Mount Athos in Balkans, also in the monastery of Saint Gregory the Sinite. And this, after the fall of the Bulgarian Tsarat in 1392, all the libraries, these Slavonic translations, libraries of the Hesychast communities, went away to the north of Danube into the Romanian principalities. So this is how we have hundreds, if not thousands, of manuscripts from that time, and many copies were also done in the scriptories and of these monasteries in the 14th and 15th centuries. And as much as I know, there is an autograph of Saint Nilus Sorsky of his testament and other writings, and it has a I don't know how should I say it, a drawing, a frontispiece at the beginning of his testament, which is drawn from the Romanian manuscripts. I mean, it was a kind of stamp. The Romanian scribes were also always drawing some types of how should I say,
illustrations.
Not quite illustration. They're not icons. There were drawings in many colors, and sometimes, if they have money, gold also. But it was kind of tradition of using them. So you may find such a frontispiece into Saint Nilus autograph. So the writings in manuscripts copied here.
So the writings originated on Athos, were translated in the time of Saint Gregory and afterwards, and brought over time to Romania. Basil collected them, and so when Saint Paisius came, he found them there and became acquainted with them. In what language? You had been reading them in Slavonic or in
Slavonic language.
Slavonic. So his translation project was to retranslate a lot of these later.
No, I wouldn't say that. He wanted just to correct the
manuscript errors.
The manuscript errors, yes. Because somewhere into his letters, he's confessing that he's not understanding all of the words in the Church Slavonic of these manuscripts. And he says Church Slavonic is a high language for me, and I cannot understand it fully. And this is why I needed the Greek originals.
I see.
So this is how everything started.
I see. So he spends time with Basil, Saint Basil. How long, more or less, did he spend before he goes to Athos?
5 years or 6 years, I don't know. Not very many years. In 1746, he left for Mount Athos, and 4 years later, Saint Basil is going to Mount Athos and offering him the tonsure into the monastic.
He was only a Rasifor. He was only a Rasifor at that time.
Yes, he was a Rasifor when he left to Athos, and Saint Basil went after him in Athos and tonsured him as a full monk.
And he stays on Athos for quite some time.
From 1746 to 1763. That is 17 years.
Yes. 63. So 63 to 94, he's back in Romania the rest of his life.
Yes. The rest of his life. And it was kind of adventurous monastic life from this point of view, because seeing him as a highly spiritual person, all the Romanian monks, young Romanian monks and young Russian monks in Mount Athos flocked around him. And from a small cell on the nearby the monastery of Pantokratoros in Athos, they gave him a larger cell, and then finally the skit of Saint Elias. But also the skit was not enough for them, and they were always poor and always struggling for building new cells because of the large number of brothers that were joining them. So that happened after 1755, I think. So it's only 8 years when from solitude life. In 8 years, there were 63 brothers in his community.
Wow.
And we know from his life that two of the Constantinopolitan patriarchs that lived in Mount Athos came to their services, joined this brotherhood, and asked him to be their confessor, their spiritual father. This is something very unusual. I mean, he was 40 or something, 47, 48 years old. He was very young, but very gifted.
So he would have been using his beloved Byzantine chant, or no?
Yes, sure. I mean, he imposed to the Russian chanters, to the Russian brothers, to learn Byzantine chant. We have manuscripts, including written in Mount Athos, with staff notation. So it's not Byzantine names, but staff notation with Greek chants, including Kratimata, so on.
So we have a long tradition of Slavonic Byzantine chant. Then, if we which is rather unknown to most people in the West.
Yes,
that there is. I mean, he was doing it in Slavonic, I'm assuming. Sure.
No, after he reached Romanian principalities, but in Mount Athos, the imposed language was Greek language.
Okay, so he was doing it in Greek then.
Yes.
So he would have mostly his disciples would have been of what background, do you think? All kinds of different backgrounds, or mostly
all kinds of different backgrounds. I mean, there Russian chanters with this experience of writing in staff notation, and also Romanian chanters knowing very well Greek language, Byzantine neumes, and
Yes.
all the other
Yes.
stuff. And we have these very, very, very important manuscripts. One is kept in Sinai Mountain Library, and the other one in St. Petersburg in Russia. Both are written around 1758 or something, in this small community of Saint Paisius, with Greek chants translated in staff notation.
Interesting, fascinating, wonderful.
Hundreds of pages. I mean, all the repertoire that was used in Mount Athos at that time.
That's wonderful. Okay, so he is there for many years. Disciples grow. Eventually, he has to come back because of the size, or there's another reason.
No, it was like this. Monasteries were under the Turkish yoke, were forced to appeal to Romanian money for surviving. Sometimes Russian money, but after Tsar Peter I, so after the beginning of the 18th century, there were no Russian money and almost no Russian monks going to Athos. So, including the nowadays Russian monastery in Mount Athos, Saint Panteleimonos, has some Romanian gates on it, because there were no money from Russia, but they needed gates. So the voivodes from Wallachia and from Moldavia sent money for restoring and keeping alive these monasteries. But being so many and so poor because of their needs, they didn't have money for their own clothes. So you should understand it was a very very tough moment in Mount Athos those years. Saint Paisius was offered the monastery of Simonos Petra by the Kinotita, by the
Holy Community,
the community of that governs Holy Mount Athos, and they went. Half of them went to Simono Petra, so that to arrange whatever was to be arranged there. In Simono Petra, there was one monk living only, because Simono Petra had very great debts to some Turkish Jewish bankers. So when these bankers heard that some monks came to live in their monastery, in this monastery in Simono Petra, they rushed to get their money back. And we know from his writing, from one of his lives, that they had only 5,000 coins or something, not very many, but they forced them to give all their money. You might understand, Mount Athos was under Turkish yoke, and Turkish military was the
policeman.
The police there. So when Turkish bankers went to Simono Petra to take their money back, they went also with the army. So what can you do? You give whatever you have, and then you run away. there is no other solution, because we know from this life written by one of his close disciples that after 2 weeks of living in Simono Petra, they went away back to Saint Elias, and in very short time, fearing that Turks and Jews will come for the rest of the money, even if they are not living in Simono Petra, they run away for Moldavia. This is why they left Athos.
I see. So kind of soft persecution drove them off of Athos, and but a real persecution because it was the army coming to get their money. So they were received in a monastery, 60 plus monks, or what happened in Moldavia?
Saint Paisius wanted to be very close to Saint Basil from Poiana Mărului, but from I don't know what kind of reason, the voivode of Wallachia didn't want him there. So he went to Iași, where in Iași was a new voivode who brought his brother, Ioan Callimachi was the name of the voivode, who brought his brother, Georgios Callimachi, if I'm not wrong. No, Gavril Callimachi. He brought him from Thessaloniki, where he was metropolitan. So Gavril Callimachi, as a metropolitan of Thessaloniki, went to Mount Athos several times and met Saint Paisius personally, and knew about his life and about his community and about his monastic struggles. So this is why when he reached Iași, the ambassador, let's say so, was the metropolitan himself, and they gave him the monastery of Dragomirna. You may look for this monastery on Google and whatever you search engine you use. It's a very, very nice, very well-built monastery where the brothers lived from 1763 up to 75. So 12 years. And in this place, from 63 brothers, the community enlarged to 250 brothers. But there was some unfortunate event that was the Russian-Turkish war from 1769 to 1772. And at the end of this war, Austria invaded the northern part of Moldavia and took it as a capture of war. So the monastery of Dragomirna was in that territory that the Moldavians had to give away to Austrians, and remained as an Austrian province up to the First World War. So Saint Paisius, knowing very well that under a Romano-Catholic dominion, that was
Austria,
he decided to run away. And after having a short correspondence with the Egumenos of Secu Monastery southwards, he ran away during the night with all his brotherhood. So they stayed in Secu Monastery for 4 years, but the properties of the monastery were not enough to offer anything they needed for because as a monastic community, you need to have workshops for clothes, for boots, for
everything,
shoes, or anything. So they are living by themselves. But to start such workshops, you need some money. So this is where the moment when Saint Paisius is going to the voivode, asking for some money, including for a workshop of patristic translations. So he, in those years, he started to form a school of translators from Greek language mainly, but also Slavonic, into Romanian language, and from Greek into Slavonic. Because everything they did was bilingual. I mean, Romanian and Slavonic language. So the voivode and the metropolitan and the boyars of Moldavia decided in 1779 to give him the largest monastery of this land, which is Neamtz Monastery. Neamtz Monastery was built at the end of 14th century, and enlarged by several voivodes during those years, and it is still in this area the largest monastery alive.
Is the church and the monastic grounds that we see today the same that St. Paisius would have found, or has it been
everything we see today is whatever St. Paisius found in Neamtz Monastery? I mean, excepting the monastic village around the monastery, because there were so many, they had to build some houses outside of the walls.
I mean, it's a very large monastery, so he filled the entire monastery, and he had brothers outside.
We know that inside only in Neamtz Monastery there were at least 500 monks during his lifetime.
Yes. So just out of curiosity, what do you think is the heart of what drew people? His holiness, his hesychastic teaching, both? What was it that made him so different and so many people were drawn to him?
Both and more. Firstly, his holiness. I mean, his main work in his life was the communion of our Lord Jesus Christ. He was a spiritual vessel, and he is praised by all the people that met him during his lifetime as a holy man.
So he had the prayer
from his youth.
Yeah, but he was a master of the prayer, of the noetic, of Jesus.
Sure. I mean, this is what he struggled for from his childhood.
Yes.
I mean, to know the context of this part of the world, we have the Orthodox churches had printings into their languages. I mean, even if it's Greek language or Slavonic language, including Romanian language, starting from 16th century, very many holy fathers translated into these languages, and very many teachings about Hesychast. One author, two authors, I can give you as an example, Saint John Climacus, whose Sunday we just celebrated some days ago, and another author, Ava Dorotheos, from Gaza, from the 6th century, and some other author, Saint Theodore the Student, from the beginning of the 9th century. This even if Saint Theodoros was not a hesychast in the purest form of definition, into his testament, he's praising the hesychast authors that he read his entire life. And I have a kind of nice story about him. He was a confessor for the icons. I mean, the army was sent to him to beat him and to confiscate his books, because the emperors didn't like his apologetic writings, and the order was to confiscate all his books. And in his cell, he had only 2 books: Saint John the Climacus and the book of the Tropologion. So this is a book that compressed what we call now octoichos, and the most important services over the year for great feasts and some great saints. So if you are a monk at the beginning of the 9th century and you are gifted with the grace of the Holy Spirit, what are you trying? What will you be forced to do after the army is confiscating your books? Oh, you write them some other books. So this is how the whole works. Homilies and apologetics and letters of Saint Theodore the Student appeared, and this is trying to replace the monastic literature that he was using prior to this moment. And okay, you don't have a Tropologion anymore. All right, you start to write another one. And this is how we have the Triodion with his superb divine compositions up to our days.
We have a saying. We have a saying in Greek: every obstacle is for the good. Yeah. And so many good things come from things we think are bad. That's how God works to redeem everything.
Yes. So he died in 1826, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Some years later. I don't know, 17 years later, the persecution against the icons stopped, and the works of the student monks were praised in the whole Orthodox world, and everyone was adopted. Not only their writings, but including their style of writing, which is a minuscule writing. The reason why we are using minuscule and majuscule letters right now is because of these monks in Constantinople from the Studian monastery. And not only that, everyone was adopting the Byzantine form text of the New Testament, because these monks were using this form of text.
Amazing.
Their influence was huge after the year 843.
It's good for us to remember that usually the saints in their days are persecuted, and afterwards they're celebrated. It seems to be very common. Saint Paisios perhaps is not unlike that as well. That's aspects that I would.
Yeah. He was also persecuted by his contemporaries, and I told you some years before that he kind of died because of this. He worked his whole life to correct the old translations into Slavonic language of the Hesychast authors, Hesychast writings. He sent them to Petrograd, to St. Petersburg, to be printed, and there the Metropolitan and his theologians considered this style of writing kind of old, and they decided to retranslate into a language more appropriate to their times. So in 1793, they sent Philokalia, Dobrotolubie in Slavonic language. They sent this book to Saint Paisius. We printed your works, and he saw that his works had nothing to do with these retranslations. And this was
this was into Russian or into another form of Slavonic that they were doing?
Another form of Slavonic. No Russian language. The first Russian translations was made by Saint Theophan Recluse in the 90s.
Could it be that different? Slavonic was not at that point was not a spoken language, was it? It was. I mean,
not a spoken language, but it was a church used language. So everyone.
I mean, how different could he have been that this bishop felt the need to modernize? It seems strange.
You know, Russian language and Russian society enter the process of modernization, starting with Tsar Peter the First. And this process didn't stop. I mean, it became worse and worse, and Russians wanted. I mean, their leaders, they wanted as much as possible to become as German as possible or as French as possible during the 18th century. Starting with their clothes, their mentality, their everything. You should know that Tsarina Ekaterina the Great invited Voltaire in her palace to teach and to learn from him what modernism should be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're working on the writings of Saint Athanasius of Paros against Voltaire and the Enlightenment thinkers. So put that in perspective. The leader of the only, pretty much one of two free Orthodox countries at that point, or maybe Georgia, I don't know the political states of all the Orthodox world, but Russia was not under the Ottoman yoke. And so to imagine that that's the kind of leadership you had that was inviting atheists to teach, I mean, it's quite startling.
Yeah. And this process of modernization touched also the church leaders. I mean, maybe they not all of them knew French language or German language as the others knew. I mean, it is well known that Napoleon and the Tsar Alexander I had a peace after a war in 1807, I think, and everything was their discussion, and everything was in French language, and the intellectuals and the boyars, the high society, everyone was writing in Russia of that time in the French language. So, I mean, including into their own homes, they used the French language to
this was before the French Revolution. We're talking about the mid 18th century.
During the French Revolution and after that. Yeah.
Even after seeing what the French Revolution.
Only after the war in 1812, they start the kind of thing to stop using it.
There's so much to discuss in history. So we're so ignorant of history. So it's so good to hear the true face of history. I mean, there's people use history today to propagandize and to reshape contemporary society. So it's very important for us. But I don't want to get too far away from St. Paisius and especially the unpublished works. So maybe we can bring the historical timeline up to the last 10 or 15 years of his life, where, as I understand it, and you can correct me, there was a greater sensitivity and interest in apologetic. Is that the right kind of realm of writings? Or at least he was caring for, let's say, the problems of the church directly in a more direct way. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So there were some happenings in Constantinople, and in the year 1755, the patriarch was Kirill V, and they, because of these happenings, I don't want to tell all the story about that. A question arose: should we receive Romano-Catholics to Orthodoxy by baptism or by chrismation? And this patriarch decided that the right manner to come to Orthodoxy is through the baptism, because Romano-Catholics didn't have baptism. They have sprinkles.
Yes.
That is not baptism. Baptism means joining in the water. I mean,
yes. Immersion.
Immersion, fully immersion in the water. This is the time, the meaning of the Greek word. I mean, we have a baptiskaf, a small submarine that is coming from baptism.
And the theology of the church, of course, is represented by the immersion, because you're dying and rising. And so it's not just a form, it's not just a question of form, but it's also pointing to the essence of the mystery, which is to die and rise.
Yes, this was one of the highest moments of theological tensions about the baptism, about Catholicism, about many other things. This patriarch was replaced by another, and during the next one in 1757, Vatican, using the French embassy in Constantinople, pressed the Orthodox Church to reverse these decisions. But these decisions were printed and spread everywhere, and many theological arguments were brought forth for proving that it is not necessary a baptism, because Romano-Catholics do not have baptism. I mean, there is no. I mean, sprinkling is not diving.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yes.
Because
so Saint
baptismos is diving into the water. It's not nothing else.
Yes.
You cannot dive by sprinkling. That's something not right.
And so this reached the Romanian provinces, this whole controversy, apparently.
Yes, because in the year 1699, Uniatism came to Transylvania also. Transylvania, you should know, was the core of the Orthodox Church for the Romanian language people, for the Romanians. Why the core? Because Moldavia and Wallachia appeared as state organizations, states in the 14th century, with nobles coming from Transylvania. They came also with bishops, they came with monks, they came with everything, and instated statesmanship and also churchship, a church organization. When these small states appeared in the 14th century. And it continued to be a very strong Orthodox core for the Romanian people up to the 18th century. When Uniatism appeared, it was a betrayal from the Metropolitan, his bishops, and many, I don't know. It seems that there are 80% of the priests embraced Uniatism, because not embracing Uniatism meant that you did not have the right to possess land or any property.
So this is because the Austrians took over most of Transylvania.
After Austrian took over Transylvania, this was one of their first decisions.
But we also have from this period, we have, as you said before we went on, we have many confessors and martyrs during the period of Austrian rule.
It was a tough war between lay people who did not accept Uniatism and preferred to remain slaves, and the others who accepted it. And to understand the percent of the Orthodox people and against Uniat betrayers, 80% of the Romanian people in Transylvania did not accept Uniatism. So they are a majority.
And were they supported by mostly the monastics, or were they?
Yes, many monastics died for their faith during those years, up to the end of the 18th century, when Orthodoxy was declared as tolerated religion. In 1763, they allowed Orthodox to have bishops again. I mean, up to that moment,
for decades, they had no hierarchy.
Yes. And their priests went to Moldavia and Wallachia to be tonsured as priests.
So this is so, Father. Most people have no idea about this history, and so when we look in a cold way at the documents or the movements of Mount Athos or the saints of the time, it's many times totally outside of the context. To understand it's very important to understand the context, right? And we're sold. We're sold, a very sanitized version, because we don't want to hear the difficult truths that are still painful to many people. And so, but it's essential to understand this is the context by which now St. Paisius and others are trying to care for the Orthodox flock.
Sure. And many monks, many brothers into his community came from Transylvania, but they didn't have the baptism, the Orthodox baptism.
They were baptized by Orthodox or by Uniates. They were leaving the Uniatism, or even the Orthodox were improperly baptizing. Or do you mean that these were converts from Uniatism? No.
The Orthodox were fine, but there were not very many priests, Orthodox priests.
Right.
So
the impact of Latinization and Latin mentality with regard for the Uniates was immediate. I mean, the people were being baptized by Uniate priests and bishops, and they were doing it in a Latin style. Yes. So that when the people grew up and they said, "I don't want to be a Uniate, I want to be Orthodox," they came to Moldavia. They had actually been baptized, quote unquote, baptized by Uniates, and now St. Paisius was dealing with this issue.
Yes, that was the problem. So we decided to rebaptize everyone who was baptized by Uniates or didn't know anything about his own past. Yes. From his family. And there were problems. I mean, there were scandals inside his brotherhood because some monks didn't accept that, including those from Russia. I mean, we have some cases from Ukrainian, Russian monks that didn't accept his decision and left for some other monasteries.
Because they had been maybe for a longer period already having these ideas in Ukraine.
Yes, sure. Much longer than in Transylvania.
I mean, years more. Probably back before the 1666, 67 councils, even in the mid 17th century, that's already starting for parts of the Russian Empire.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a century more than in Transylvania,
Yeah.
It's a mentality that everyone was living with.
Fascinating. Yeah. So St. Paisius is dealing with this particular issue, and what does he do besides what you said? Does he, in terms of writings?
You should know that this Patriarch Kirill was forced to retreat to Mount Athos, and he was one of the friends of the brotherhood of St. Paisius.
Interesting.
So right from the beginning, St. Paisius was on the Orthodox line because he had this background. I mean, he came from Ukraine. He saw with his own eyes what happens with Uniatism and not respecting strictly the Orthodox way. So when he came to Moldavia and many monks were coming to him, he had to decide for them how should they remain in the monastery, through baptism or not. So there are tough struggles, including for many Russians and Ukrainians from the Polish kingdom. Okay, we know that Polish kingdom disappeared. It was split away between Russia and Germany and Prussia, Austria and Prussia. But up to that moment, everything was in a very not straight way, not Orthodox way, into the Ukrainian lands. So he had to decide what to do about baptism for the newcomers into his brotherhood. And this is how we have some writings, very very tough apologetic writings about baptism, about Orthodoxy, about the needing of holy mysteries in the Orthodox Church, and completely rejecting any kind of ecumenism, as we call it today.
So there was already a lot of compromising going on in his day with regard to the boundaries and sacramentology.
If a lot, but there were. And this is how many theological discussions and struggles started.
So is this the period of time that he would have requested from Dorotheus Volusmas, who was, I understand, his spiritual child, not unlike the bishops you mentioned from the Patriarchate, the treaties that we know, the need for baptism? Would this have been about the same time, the last 5 or 10 years of his life? Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yes, and you might know this. Saint Paisius left Mount Athos, but many monks from his brotherhood were sent to Mount Athos, Constantinople, and the islands to search for patristic writings. Therefore, all these manuscripts, they were his agents, let's say. So
his special agents.
He was in touch with everything that happened in the Greek milieu, all the theological discussions and tensions and whatever, and they paid to the scribes of their time to copy the writings of the Holy Fathers, especially Hesychast authors, but not only. I mean, in the library of Romanian Academy, we have, like, I don't know, 1,300 or 1,400 manuscripts from that time, copied or bought by these monastic agents.
So would they go to a place like Athos or Constantinople and stay for months and just sit and copy? So that would be one of the tests?
Not months, years.
Oh, wow. Years.
Yeah.
They would live the life there with the local community. They'd be accepted in as part of the community, and they would do that work. That's amazing.
Sure. So you should know that the libraries in Mount Athos had almost the same libraries that we can find in our days, but there were no catalogs. So you need years to go through all the pages of the manuscripts to find what you're looking for.
Oh, wow. So it's amazing. It's amazing the work that was done by his disciples. And then I guess also to a certain degree later on by St. Nicodemus and other Kolivadis fathers, they were doing something similar.
There was a certain Constantius, the monk, who copied also for St. Paisius and also for St. Nicodemus.
Interesting. Fascinating. And we know St. Nicodemus actually got up at some point and wanted to go to Moldavia and be his disciple. And join him.
Yes. After he printed Philokalia next year, and Evergetinos. So in 1783, he decided to come to Neamtz monastery. But the divine providence decided some other way. Yes. And he understood reaching with the ship in Tassos Island near Athos. He understood that everything was against his move to go to Saint Paisius, and he returned to Mount Athos.
Well, and it's obvious the rest of the history shows why he was needed on Athos and the work he did there.
Sure. I mean, his work, life works is
amazing,
mandatory for the Orthodox Church. I mean,
what's fascinating to me as someone who's interested in these dogmatic problems and issues in terms of our church today, of course, is that it's really already almost the exact issues we're dealing with today are already being dealt with by the fathers there. They're working together because we know that Velichkovsky was working with Saint Nicodemus on the Pedalion, and he's the disciple of Saint Paisius, and Saint Paisius has his disciples also working on Athos at the same time. So it would be really a mistake to imagine that they were either opposed or they were ignorant of one another. They must have been.
No, they knew one another very well. I mean, they had these monastics, so-called agents, that went back and forth from Mount Athos to Moldavia, and from Mount Athos from Constantinople to Moldavia. There is a certain Greek nobleman from Karaja family that came in 1780 to Neamtz monastery to bring one of the most valuable manuscripts that his father had in his library to bring to Saint Paisius personally. How did they know in Constantinople that he needed those authors?
It also sheds light on Patriarch Kirill, who is maligned in Western academic sources because of his decision to basically return to a previous stance. I mean, the Russian Church for 500 years baptized every convert from the West until the 1666 Council, and the Church in Romanity, in Romeocene, in the Byzantine world, was already baptizing them at the time of the schism. There's protests from the Latins that why are you baptizing our converts? So this is not something new. He's returning to a practice but now he's returning on the basis of treatises such as, or at least councils such as Velichkovsky, or I think Velichkovsky came later, but you had in the time of Kirill, you had the lay theologian, his name just escaped me, very well known, that Callistos Ware did a whole book on. Yes. Right. And so you have this light. I had no idea that he was connected with Saint Paisius of Velichkovsky, Patriarch Kirill. It's fascinating.
Everyone.
It makes sense. Yes, makes total sense. So he responds, if I'm not mistaken, he responds by asking Dorotheus Velichkovsky as I guess they saw him as a very capable scholar that could produce this work, and he produces this work. I think I'm butchering the title now, but it's something like the 2 commands of the Lord before and after the resurrection to baptize, and he's analyzing the criteria of the Holy Fathers for on what basis one could economize or not, and he's basically saying that it's impossible now to economize because they've abandoned the form, et cetera, et cetera. And he's showing the treatise is amazing. We're working on the publication of this in English. But what's fascinating to me is that St. Paisius requests this treatise and then it's sent to him and he translates it into Romanian or into Slavonic. What happens?
No, up to this moment, I didn't find their translation. But as much as I know, 13 autograph manuscripts of Saint Paisius are not in Romania right now, and I should get them. Maybe these treatises were translated by Saint Paisius himself when he received them, because we have many other writings about baptism that Saint Paisius translated from Greek language, from the works of Dositeos of Jerusalem, Tomos Agapis, Tomos Haras, and Tomos Catalagis.
That's Eighth Ecumenical
yes.
Council.
Yes,
Fascinating.
Yes, they are translated into Slavonic by Saint Paisius himself.
Wow, that's an amazing thing. What a beautiful thing. We've translated into English the Acts of the Eighth Ecumenical Council and published them last year or 2 years ago. So that's a tremendous, wonderful thing to hear for us, that St. Paisius was doing the same thing into Church Slavonic back in the end.
So maybe these writings were translated into Romanian language. I don't know that. There was a happening that took place in Neamtz Monastery in 1862, when a former Freemason became a monk, and the atheist government imposed him as an abbot. And finally, the community rejected him after 2 years. And right before leaving the monastery, he started a fire into the library.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah. And whatever we have right now is whatever escaped from that fire.
Satanic. See, the devil knows how important these things are.
Yeah.
So you have writings of Saint Paisius in Romanian that have never been published. Is that accurate?
In Romanian language, no, only correspondence. I mean, letters to some.
But translations of his Church Slavonic works were made into Romanian and never published, or they were published?
Not all of them. Not all of them. I mean, these treatises about the holy mysteries, translations from the works of Dositeos of Jerusalem were not translated. I mean, okay, we have those works in the Greek original. We don't need his intermediary Slavonic translation, but many other. I mean, these compilations are made by him. They're autographs, and even if we have all of the texts in Romanian language or partly in the future, as I was requested by our Metropolitan, we will make, God willing, in the next months, let's hope, we will print them as they are in the manuscripts.
So they're going to be in Church Slavonic, though? They're not in Romanian?
No. They will be in Romanian language. In Church Slavonic, only the unedited text, their original text. I mean, if he wrote something, an introduction or a point of view on the subject, yes, we will publish the Slavonic original also.
So these are dealing with what issues besides the one we've mentioned already, which is the question of the unions and reception? Are there other issues that he's looking at?
Mostly these, but there are some other facts about the divine grace and about the work of the Hesychast prayer. I don't know why, but right before his repose in 1793, he was accused of being a Freemason only because he used a list of authors not known to the rest of the church, and practicing this prayer was a kind of accusation brought forth by some mad monk. So he wrote a treaty. That treaty is in Slavonic, is published, I think, is in Slavonic language, against this monk, and it also translated into Romanian language and published into those 2 volumes that I printed many years ago.
Mm-hmm. Also, his autobiography is in a way an answer to all of these critics as well, you were telling me.
Sure. Right at the beginning of the autobiography, I'm using this edition, which I published 4 years ago. Right at the beginning, in the prologue of his autobiography, he's writing this. And because on one side, some of this holy brotherhood are fearing of hidden spies, especially about those born into unorthodox countries, so that after my repose from this life, and after the repose of the holy brothers that know very well about me, where I was born, the holy brothers should not doubt anything about me. I'm right. I decided to write this. So he was accused of being a Russian agent, a Russian spy, by some of the monks that came into his last monastic years, into his last years of his life.
Now, this is in the context of a political context, historical context that makes it even more intense, right? Why a Russian spy? Of course, he's from Ukraine, he's from Poltava, but is there a political, dispute or controversy going on in the background that would?
Yes, we know that in Russia. Firstly, there are two sides of the story, two points of view. Firstly, the Tsarina Ekaterina the Great, who was contemporary with Saint Paisius, persecuted the Orthodox Church and continued some of the reforms started by Peter I. So she was perceived in these countries as a kind of forerunner of the Antichrist, especially because she was a German woman who didn't have a correct understanding of Orthodoxy. All right. During the Russian-Turkish War in 1789, 1792, so right at the end of the life of Saint Paisius, the Tsarina sent personally to Saint Paisius a huge gospel with enamels, gold, diamonds, and some other stuff, some other expensive stuff, and a huge precious cross, also ornated with precious metals, and some other gifts. And because in that year, so I'm referring to 1790, Russians occupied the Romanian principalities and replaced the church hierarchy completely, and replaced the political hierarchy completely.
So this is the northern part of Moldavia, which is the contemporary country.
No, all Moldavia. So it's not all
including Neamtz. He was under the Russian rule.
Sure.
And this began in what year? 1790.
Yes, 1790. So this bishop Ambrosius, metropolitan, I don't know what he was. He was sent by the Tsarina to bring these gifts to Saint Paisius, and against all the rules, he decided to promote Saint Paisius as archimandrite. And many of the monks living here starting accusing him as being an agent of Russian power. But you're not allowed to refuse the gifts of someone who thought that she was the leader of the Orthodox faith in all the Orthodox people around. So what can you do? So this is a very delicate moment. This is not the first time when Saint Paisius was accused of that. And this is why in 1781, his economos, the administrator, I don't know, how should I translate it into English?
We don't, I think. We just keep economos. Yeah, Yeah, there's a term actually. It's not sacristan, but yeah, the one in charge of all the goods of the monastery, right? He has to take care of them. Right?
Georgios, who was a very holy man, left for the Mount Athos after 24 years of being economos of the Brotherhood. He was forced to remain in Bucharest, and he was given the monastery of Cernica and also the monastery of Calderușani. It's a huge monastery near Bucharest. When he became abbot there, being such a huge ascetic and lover of ascetic life, many brothers came around him, and he decided into his typicon of the monastery, he decided to not allow anyone to come to his monastery other than Romanians. So no Greeks, no Russian, no anyone, not anyone else.
He was Romanian, obviously, himself.
Yes, he was from Transylvania. Why did he decide that in 1781? Why that? Because he had the experience with the Brotherhood in Neamtz Monastery, and he knew the tensions and the accusations and the fights that sometimes appeared, mostly into the speaking milieu, not in the physical milieu, between the monks belonging to different nations. Because there were Romanians, Russians, Greeks, I don't know, Albanians. There were some 7 or 8 nations inside of the Brotherhood in Neamtz Monastery. So it was not the very pleasant moment to lead a multinational brotherhood, especially when nationalistic views appeared everywhere in Europe.
Was there a kind of was this an age of the rise of a kind of ethnophiletism, or is that not really an issue? There's still
no. That is much too early.
Much too early. So the problem is not so much that they themselves see themselves as opposed to one another, but they were being used for political. There are political machinations behind the scenes.
Sure. Yeah. So it was a general atmosphere, a general anti-Russian movement into the Romanian principalities because of the bad habits that Russians had when they occupied these countries. And I mean, I know very well that they confiscated everything that they wanted. No one was able to oppose them. They didn't pay for food, for horses, for whatever. So they are not welcome here.
So that was putting the work of Saint Paisius. I mean, the devil's always looking for a way to destroy, to split up, to oppose brothers, and so this was the way the devil got. It was kind of a temptation toward the end of his life. You see that in the lives of the saints; they have some big temptation at the end of their life, and this was his cross to bear. This massive community now is going to be undermined by all of these implications, political implications.
One of the huge crosses that he had to bear, because right after he came here, he started to copy the translations that were made by the brothers into Romanian language. We found manuscripts, monastic manuscripts, everywhere, not only in Moldavian milieu, but also Transylvania, Wallachia, and some other parts of the world. Everywhere, starting with 1760s, you may find copies of ascetic literature translated into Romanian language for monks, especially for monks, but not only for monks. We know that everyone who knew how to read and write wanted to have these writings for his personal use. So this is why we have such a huge number of manuscripts. I told you, almost 3,000 manuscripts only in one library, the Romanian Academy Library in Bucharest.
What would you say that for Romania? We know about the impact of his translations and his work and his disciples that went on, some of them back to Russia, Optina, the future there. At least I've read different praise for him in terms of the Philocalic Renaissance in monasticism in Russia. But for Romania, what would you say is his greatest impact? First in generally, but specifically, my interest, because it's unknown to most of us, is with regard to those vital issues of orthodoxy and heterodoxy, orthodoxy and the integrity of dogmatic consciousness of the people. But first of all, generally, his greatest impact for Romania, and then more specifically with regard to those issues, did he leave a huge impact, and how would you describe it?
I think he was the light who is enlightening the world around these monasteries that he was living in. I mean, also Dragomirna, also Secu, also Neamtz became the city above the mountain that our Lord is talking about. So it can be seen from anywhere, and they became the monastic brotherhood and the monastic life and the monastic preoccupations, like 1,000 years prior, with the case of Saint Theodore the Student, became the absolute model for the Christian world here. And not only his translations, not only the teaching of the Jesus prayer, of the Hesychast prayer and the spiritual life, not only these, but also the typicon, also the Byzantine music compositions and repertoire. Everything was received and promoted as the highest model available.
That's amazing.
During his life and during the next 100 years until the atheist regimes that came after 80, 60 something.
So the Romanian people, in spite of the accusations, saw him as their own, and they were not impressed by the accusations of him being a Russian spy or being.
No. For surely he was the model, the holy model of these countries, of the whole church.
Does he continue today for those fathers in Romania who are pushing back against the pan-heresy of ecumenism or the various compromises with regard to the boundaries and identity of the church? Does he still? Is he appealed to in contemporary Romania?
Yes,
as
for sure. I mean, it was a kind of shock in 1999 when Pope John Paul II was invited in Bucharest. It was a shock for many to find out that Saint Paisius wrote by his own hand that the Pope and the Papist Church is a heretic. So this is Papism is a heresy. These are his own words, and there were some posters glued on the walls on the streets of Bucharest prior to the coming of the Pope in Bucharest, and many were persecuted by police and those.
Right,
those,
right. Politically incorrect time to bring that up.
Sure, sure.
So that's very important for us today, and it seems like it's always going to be for the church going forward. Is the inheritance, the parakatethiki, as we say in Greek, the deposit that our holy fathers give us and leave us. We have to treasure it, and this is why I wanted to have you on today to discuss those aspects, the context for it, those aspects of his work that are unknown, because almost everyone commemorates his impact on the Hesychast. It's,
okay. He was a great Hesychast, but not only that.
Yes, exactly.
He was a strictly Orthodox Christian.
And this was not just a theoretical question for him. He had a pastoral imperative that he was dealing with in his own brotherhood, and that's always how it is with the fathers. The fathers are responding pastorally but dogmatically in an Orthodox manner to those provocations. Yes.
So Neamtz Brotherhood was a model for the bishops in Transylvania that started to baptize those coming from Uniatism. And I have many documents. I have found many documents from the 19th century, from the beginning of the 19th century, that all of those were marrying into some Orthodox families. All of those coming from Uniatism or Romano-Catholicism. Everyone was baptized. So it's not about Moldavia. It's about all these three Romanian principalities that we are now calling Romania, Republic of Romania. They were baptized up to 1860, 1870 or something.
So that sheds some, helps us to put into context also the fallacious, mistaken claims of certain academics today in Greece who say that Saint Nicodemus, the Hagirite, didn't really believe the need for baptism. He was forced into it by Dorotheus Volismas. He ended up compromising his own principles to allow them to print in the pedalion that they must be baptized. I mean, if you understand, he saw Saint Paisius as his future elder, and they revered him as a saint. And yet he's going to be contrary to Saint Paisius, or forced into something as basic as this question. It's kind of farcical, the idea. But so this context helps us to understand that this is impossible.
Sure. No, it's out of the question. Saint Nicodemus was in the same spirit of Saint Paisius, and whatever experience that they have in the Romanian principalities and Romanian monasteries, the Greek milieu assumed also, and they knew about one another, and it was a common shared experience. And it was not something, it's up there somewhere. No.
Yes. Well, this is extremely encouraging for us who are struggling today to serve and promote the patristic heritage, and to understand the mind of the fathers, that we can live by it. So thank you so much for joining us, Father, today, and I hope that we can do this sometime in the future. The historical context is extremely important, and you have a handle on it. You helped us back when we did the Eighth Ecumenical Council with the historical context of the Filioque in the West, which was extremely illuminating. I encourage everyone to listen to that talk that you gave to the conference.
I'm sorry for my English language. I'm not speaking it very, very often, but
you do great.
With a bit of patience, you may find out that adopting Filioque in the Western countries, in the Western Church, it was not a decision that was taken overnight. It was a struggle over 500 years, half a millennium.
Yes,
that is not something to not take into account.
Yes, not some minimal. There was, as if there was no resistance, or it all happened with fiat, the decision of the Pope. In fact, many opposed it and many remained Orthodox for long periods, in spite of the compromise under the Franks by the Romans in Rome. But all of that was illuminating. This has been very illuminating, and we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And maybe now that I'm yes, go ahead.
I'm open to share my small experience with these holy fathers that
maybe we can do something in the future to talk about your elder Justin, who we love and revere, and God willing, we'll see his life in English in the near future, sometime in the future. Because I know
you should write into that translation that he was one of the last Paisian monks that lived together with elders Paisius and Cleopa from Austria. He lived completely into the Paisian inheritance.
I would go ahead and ask you if you would please write a introduction or preface to the English edition. That would be a great honor for us, since you lived next to the elder. And you yourself have begun to write the life of the elder. You started to write the life of the elder. You would know best.
Yes, there is a first volume, and I need to come back to writing the second and the third volume dedicated to his life.
I was speaking with Metropolitan Neophytos a few days ago, and he reveres Elder Justin. He loves him, and he really considers him a saint. And in fact, he told me that he's been glorified, essentially, that he's a saint. And
he's a saint. We know that directly, and just talking to him, and the answer coming right away.
Do you think it'll be long until he's actually recognized officially by the Romanian Church?
I don't know. I know there are many inside the bishops, the synod, that want him canonized. We do also, but you see these times. These are not nice times to to start building a church dedicated to a saint. For just to give you a short example,
there are practical problems that we're going to be facing. Big practical problems. We can see them coming. God help us through the prayers of Father.
People are starting becoming poor and poor, and even today someone told me that the taxes for I don't know, some buildings and some land that he has were 50,000 euros or dollars, US dollars, which is 10 times more than last year. So
they're going to drive everyone into utter poverty in Europe. The way things are.
It's a huge runaway to the poverty. Not only Romania, but all the other European countries.
Yes. God help us. God help us. God help us. Well, we'll see you again, I hope, soon, and good struggles and a bright Pascha and Holy Week to you and the fathers.
Thank you also, and we wish you a blessed resurrection of our Lord into our heart, into our family, into your heart, your family, your community of Christians.
Glory to God. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
All right. Well, there's our interview with Father Filotheu. Thank you for your patience, and we're looking forward to your questions. There's a lot there I would like to comment on. Before we get to your questions, I just want to point out some things, resources for all of you who want to go deeper into St. Paisius. Some people talked about in the chat, this book, which you can definitely access, St. Paisius Velichkovsky of Neamtz and Paisianism. What's interesting about this text is it goes into the future, long after the repose of St. Paisius, into the tradition in Eastern Europe, in the burning bush movement of the 20th century, St. Seraphim Sarah, of course, in Russia, the elders of Optina, here in America with St. Herman of Alaska, and in the monastic life throughout the Orthodox Church. So this is more of a post St. Paisius influence as it is a life. And then there's this text that was also, I think, mentioned earlier in the chat. Let's see if we can get that on the screen. Can you get that? There we go. St. Paisius of Velichkovsky, Holy Elder of Moldavia, Life, Doctrine of Mental Prayer. And this focuses pretty exclusively on his life and his impact in terms of the hesychism. And so this is, something you would expect and is common in when people talk about St. Paisius. But we talked about tonight, as you heard, his struggle for orthodoxy against the various heterodox, and indeed the challenge to the monastic life, that this was a pastoral imperative that he was dealing with in an existential way there with the conquering of Transylvania by the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. You had, as you heard, 80%, he said, of the clergy, but 80% of the people did not go with the clergy. So you had this uniatism, but the people resisted. And it's a fascinating history. I'd love to hear more. I was wondering as I was listening, where could I find an historical review of this? Because it's very important for us to understand the struggle against the uniatism in Eastern Europe. It's extremely revealing for many reasons, both the good and the bad in terms of what happens in the 20th century. But you saw there that he had people fleeing. This was decades and decades of Austrian rule. And you had people fleeing to Moldavia where they were free, to the monasteries to become monks. And so he had people who were not baptized, in other words, immersed at all, but because they had been influenced by the Latins in the West, they were baptizing like Latins. And so he, of course, as we know, as we heard, refused to receive by any kind of economia any of the heterodox at the time, including the Uniates, including the Latins, including the various Protestant confessions. He baptized everyone without question. This is exactly what has happened for 200 plus years since those days on Mount Athos. This is the standard of the saints who have dealt with this face on. Now, the other important thing to take away, I think there's many things that I'd like to talk about, but it's important to take away, is St. Paisius' close relationship with Dorotheus Volismas. Now, I'm excited to tell you tonight, but it's going to take months probably until it's going to be in circulation. But let me just show you. This is the first page of the manuscript translation of the work of Dorotheus Volismas, the Apologia, the defense that he wrote, and he entitled it, "Those who do not baptize heretics despise the commandments of the Master." In other words, both before and after the resurrection. This is the treatise that St. Paisius requested of his spiritual son, Dorotheus Volismas, who was at the Patriarchate. You heard how let's see if we can put it like this. No, I always get this wrong. How do I do this? Here, that's what we want to put. You heard how Father Filotheu talked about there were bishops from the Patriarchate who would go to Athos for his spiritual guidance, and he was only a 39-year-old hieromonk. He had 64 or so disciples. He was a phenomenon at the time because I think at this time on Athos, at the middle of the 18th century, it seems that there was not a huge, young, dynamic. I don't know a lot, but this is what it seems to me, and I'm happy to be corrected. But it seems like that's why he stood out so greatly. Of course, he was a holy elder, a holy ascetic, but a young man attracting bishops from the Patriarchate. But also, he was during that time he was close to Patriarch Kirill, who was exiled more than once by the powers that be. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Actually, maybe we'll talk about that right now. What's fascinating here, let me just bring that up. I was just doing some research as I was watching here. And where is it now? Where did I put it? There it is. So listen to this for those of you who have interest in church history. So Saint Cyril is often presented, even in the Wikipedia article, let me bring it up on the screen here for you, as in a very negative light. And so it struck me, what's the bias? Why is there so much bias? Because people are so dedicated to not dealing with or accepting the patristic line with regard to this topic. It's extremely defensive. So even in the Wikipedia article, as I have here on the screen, let me bring it up. Where did it go? This is it here. In the beginning of the article, it says a controversial figure, Saint Patriarch Kirill, often blamed for his ideas about baptism. What does it mean, blamed for his ideas? That's a very strange way to put it. Blamed for his ideas. That's a total bias here in the article writer. And of course, they butchered the actual presentation. Nobody's talking about rebaptizing. That's really an inappropriate word. It's either baptism or not. They talk about validity, which is kind of a Western way to think about it. Anyway, let's go down to the relevant section here that I thought I would share with you. So listen to what it says here. Where is it? Here. The opposition now, right? So he issues his his decision, and the opposition to him is led by the Metropolitan of Proialavo, which I guess is in Romania. Interestingly, I didn't know that, but he was a Greek. He was going to be would have been a Greek probably, because he was in the Ecumenical Patriarchate Synod, and the future Callinicos IV of Constantinople. Cyril V ordered Callinicos into exile to Sinai. So what does he do? He doesn't do obedience and goes to Sinai. He goes to the French embassy. What does that mean? He goes to the papists. He goes to the papists. He gets French help. The papacy is actually using the French embassy for political pressure to overturn the 1755 decision. So people always commemorate the opposition of the synod, but who in the synod is opposing him? People who are in bed with the papists. That's who's opposing Patriarch Cyril. And they're running to the French embassy so they don't have to go into the monastery in Sinai. Callinicus obtained a large amount of money, which were given by the Sultan, and resulted in Cyril's second and final deposition in 1757. So 2 years after the encyclical on baptism. So they're literally bribing the leaders so they can get rid of Cyril. But Cyril's always painted in a bad light. So who's friends with Cyril? The saints. Saint Paisius with Cyril. And that's what we heard tonight, which was news to me. I didn't know anything about that. So that's fascinating. But I want to get back to Dorotheus Voulismas. Now, Dorotheus Voulismas is a really important figure who nobody knows about. As is usual, we don't know our own history as Orthodox because we're listening to some Western academics usually. So I have in my hands here the publication, massive publication in Greek of the Kolivadis Fathers and Dorotheus Voulismas. The question of the Anakrisios, the review by Dorotheus Voulismas of the Pedalion and the Canonicon, which is another canonical text produced by the Athenites at the time. So Dorotheus Voulismas is a very, very educated man, a disciple of St. Paisius of Velichkovsky, as was these other bishops, and apparently St. Cyril also a big supporter. And he is charged by the Patriarchate to review the Pedalion. And during this review with his friends, like Saint Nicodemus, and of course, did you hear Saint Nicodemus tried to go join his monastery, St. Paisius' monastery? He literally tried to get on a boat, but he realized it was not God's will for him to leave Athos and go become a disciple of St. Paisius Velichkovsky, St. Nicodemus the Athonite. Amazing to think about that. Now, and there are some academics and some people in the OCA in America who want us to believe that St. Nicodemus did not have oneness of mind on these basic dogmatic questions with such a such a revered figure as Saint Paisius. And of course, Dorotheus Volusmas, who was again asked by Saint Paisius to write the treatise that we've translated and we're going to publish on this whole topic. These men were co-workers. They were friends. They revered the saints of the church, and they followed them with all their heart, soul, and mind. This is the point. So we have the treatise, and we have also the total complete collection of the correspondence between not only Volusmas and Nicodemus, but also other important figures like Saint Paisius Velichkovsky. We have the correspondence here of Saint Paisius asking Volusmas to write the treatise, and how he had total 100% agreement with the treatise, which of course is very close to what is in the Pedalion and is what became the position of the Ecumenical Patriarchate over and against the Latinizers, who, as we saw, were running to the French embassy to get rid of the Patriarch. A lot of this stuff is not discussed anywhere in our seminaries or among our academics. It's all buried. And this is why, one of the reasons why I want to talk to Father Filotheus, who is the most educated and knowledgeable on the writings of St. Paisius. As you saw, he's the publisher of the Life, and he's been charged by the elders and bishops to basically bring to circulation again important publications that St. Paisius had done in his day. So a wonderful look at some of the historical aspects of the struggle for orthodoxy in the 18th century. You heard about the terrible influence of Catherine the Great and Peter the so-called Great, Catherine so-called Great, who were terrible for the Orthodox Church. We forget about that. We have sometimes a tendency to very easily gloss over, for the sake of kind of ethno-nationalism, right? To gloss over some very, very painful parts of our own church history with regard to the rulers who were thoroughly secularized and westernized. She called, you heard what the father said, she called Voltaire, who? The enemy of Christ and orthodoxy, Voltaire, to come and teach in the palace in St. Petersburg. This was the kind of blind, xenomania that took over the Russian elite and took over the Greek elite as well. Frankly, they also were heavily influenced by the French Revolution and the Enlightenment, and Korais and all the Enlightenment thinkers in Greece, equally destructive to the Greek Orthodox, or rather Roman Orthodox tradition that the church had maintained throughout the Turkish period. So important parts of our history, brothers and sisters, that if we don't understand, don't care about, don't have the patience to do due diligence, we will go on ceding the podium to people who are not well-grounded and not lovers of the saints and not deeply enmeshed in the Orthodox phronema. They might be well-intended, they might be good people, but that doesn't make them capable or qualified to understand and speak about the Orthodox outlook and Orthodox phronema. So these are just some thoughts after listening to our interview. Of course, we did it earlier today. I'd love to have your questions, and I hope that we can have a really robust discussion about this. And any questions you'd like to go further, let me know. So let's start out with, let's see. We'll start out with the super chats, of course, and then we'll come back and we'll look at your other questions. Thank you, Father Hears and Father Monk Filotheu. Your English is perfect. Thank you for your donation and your support. Appreciate it. Also, we have this little note, which from the same person. I appreciate the donation. Really kind of you. Blessed Lamb Father, if you enable other channels to raid you, you can send their viewers to you when they end. They can send your viewers to you when they end their app. Yeah, I had no idea that this was some kind of setting that I had to have, and I'm happy to change it going forward. And I did talk already to DPH from the Cotel group, and we worked it out for next time. So Appreciate that. All right, another super chat. Would you consider recording an interview with Metropolitan Theophilus of Morphu to discuss his latest recommendations regarding the fulfilling World War III prophecies lately in Iran? His discussions are useful. Yes, absolutely. I would consider that. I don't know if he would. He's in a much more delicate political situation that I am in America as a priest, as a bishop in Cyprus. So I think he, would love to. I know he loves to come on. We've had him 3 times, right? We've had him 3 times at every conference we've done in the last couple of years. So there's no doubt about that. But whether he wants it now at this particular junction is another issue, because as you saw, if you didn't see, he's going. They're retrying him after five plus years. They're bringing him back to court, and a higher court has overturned the lower court. He was acquitted of, violating the law because he wanted to do theophany and told people to go down to the river and to be present when he throws in the cross and all the rest. He was charged at the time for violating the law with regard to, the COVID restrictions. He was vindicated, or he was acquitted, but 2 years later, and now they've gone up to a higher court and they're going to retry him for the great sin of praying on the Feast of Theophany back in like 2020 or 21, I forget. So he's got his political enemies in Cyprus. We'll see. Bill Hicks, thanks for your donation. Please pray for Father Lexi and Adelaide, who has been slandered and dismissed as rector of our parish, leaving our church closed during Great Land. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know about the details, but God help you in this trial. Sorry to hear that. God have mercy. So, is there a book on church tradition that was conveyed through the centuries by word of mouth, like the life of the Theotokos after the resurrection? A book on church tradition that was conveyed through the centuries by word of mouth, like the life of the Theotokos after the resurrection. I don't know. Anything come to mind? I'm not really sure exactly what you're asking. Like, is the book on church tradition? I don't think there isn't a book that I know that's an ancient book written about church tradition. Church tradition is simply the passing on of the life of the church. Like, people don't sit down and write about that which they're living, right? And it's not very common that you would just live it. You would just pass it on, and especially during the first 300 years, nobody was doing that. But is there something like? We have books about the early church, if that's what you're asking. I'm not really sure what you're asking, but we have books, for instance, Eusebius's church history, ecclesiastical history. We have treatises and books later on the Theotokos that make up, eventually write down and include and defend the place of the Theotokos in church life. St. Maximus Confessor has text, but not sure exactly what you're asking. On church tradition, no, I don't think so. But are there many books that came down to us? I don't think there were books that were written hundreds and hundreds of years later. Like, we had an oral tradition, and then somebody said, "Let's write this down." Of course, hundreds of years later, let's write this down. But I don't know. Anybody in the chat want to try to answer that? I'm not really sure. I'm probably missing something. Okay. Let's go to other questions then in the meantime. And when I welcome a new member, Coop, whatever that is, welcome. John says it's not in print and you won't find a copy, so ask St. Herman's to put it back into print if you ever talk to them. That's referring to this first version that I talked about here, St. Paisius of Velichkovsky, the man behind the Philokalia. John says it's not in print, unfortunately. Sorry to hear that. I knew it wasn't in print, but maybe you can find old copies. Is there any connection between St. Paisius of Velichkovsky, St. Paisius of Manathos, and St. Paisius the Great? Of course there is. They all have St. Paisius the Great's name. That's basically what that means. They're all named after the first St. Paisius. So beyond that, they're all saints. I don't think beyond that there's some connection, like, because they lived many years apart. But they're connected because of the name. Some people are saying that the book is no longer available. I recently purchased a book, St. Paisius of Neamtz, the Holy Elder of Moldavia, Life and Doctrine in the Mental Prayer. That's the one I just showed you earlier, right? So that is available. That's a different book than the one by Father Seraphim Rose. Did St. Paisius have a spiritual father? Yes, he did have a spiritual father. Of course, he was St. Basil. But when he went to Athos, St. Basil stayed back in Romania. And so on Athos, he didn't find a great guide for hesychism. That's what it says in the life in any case. And he lived as a brother with his co-struggler. So he became, I think after 6 years with St. Basil, that was the definitive years of his monastic formation. And St. Basil came to Athos, as we heard, to tantra him. So I think that was his spiritual father. I'm not sure why this is controversial. Father bless, some time ago I got a copy of my elder Joseph Hesychast, and I loved it. I was wondering if you think it's a good idea to lend it to interested secular friends. I don't know. I don't know who these, what normally no. I think that's not for a non-Orthodox Christian person, because there's going to be a lot in there that they're not going to be able to get. But there could be exceptions to that. You might feel that this person is really an exception, right? He actually has a good disposition and he has some intuitive sense there that makes it easy for him to, he's not going to mock. He's not going to, you don't want to throw pearls before swine or the holy things to the dogs, as the scripture says. So you want to make sure people are in a position to receive something. You don't just shove it in their mouth. So it depends on the disposition of those friends of yours. I think that's the key, and I can't tell you if they have a good disposition, so you'll have to make the call. From Anonymous on Facebook, Father, is it okay for, I'm assuming here you want to say a couple, a married couple, because that's the only context for sexual relations, to have sexual relations during the period? In other words, the woman's menstrual cycle. The active part. Leviticus in the Bible forbids it, but aren't we now under the new covenant? St. Paul says that marriage bed is undefiled. Yeah, that whole marriage bed is undefiled is very misunderstood and misused by people today. So scripture is clear in Leviticus, right? We all know this. This is not news, and I think everybody accepts it who is discussing this topic, that it's forbidden. And so you can go to Leviticus 15, 19 to 23, again 18, 19, and then 20, 18. These are all portions of Leviticus where it's very severe, actually. If someone does this, they're cut off from their people. So scripture rejects it out of hand. Now, some people say, as you said here in your question, well, that's old school, that's old world, that's old, Old Testament, that doesn't matter. Well, there needs to be discernment on what matters and what does not matter and what has been put aside. There are certain things that have been obviously put aside because they were types that had fulfillment. So circumcision is fulfilled with baptism. If you insist, as St. Paul says in circumcision, it's as if you're saying the baptism is not sufficient, or the mysteries, you need something. This type is still needed when you have the fulfillment. Why? Is that the case with this question? No. This is a question that is as practical as it is ethical. And there are things in the moral law, the Ten Commandments, obviously, that have never been put aside because they're Old Testament, right? So the ritual law, which is a type, which was a preparation, which has been fulfilled in Christ, he is the Passover lamb. He is the high priest. He is, according to the order of Melchizedek, all of this, obviously, we're not Jews, we're still sacrificing animals. So there are things in the Old Testament that are put aside, and there are things that are not. And so the question is this clear rejection of sexual relations during menstrual cycle put aside? The question is, why would it be put aside? What's the case for it to be put aside? We know in the Old Testament as well, which we don't put aside, that the Lord was very displeased with the spilling of the seed, for example. Very displeased. So we know also from the patristic writings with regard to relations in marriage that they liken it to the farmer, right, who plants his seeds and waits for the harvest. He doesn't keep planting indiscriminately in the middle of the freezing cold, right? He doesn't plant his seeds indiscriminately. He has a brain. So, and the fathers likened the wisdom of the farmer and the seed of the man is for procreation. It's the context. So it's both and an Orthodox Christian understanding of marriage, right? It's both relations of a man and wife. It's absolutely blessed. The marriage bed is undefiled in that sense, that this is not seen as fornication. The context is blessed. In that context, this is blessed. Because why? Not only because it's going to be the expression of love, conjugal relations, etc., but because it's open and its purpose really ultimately is procreation, that the human race will continue and grow. Those two things are inseparable. We don't separate them. We don't intentionally throw the seed aside. We don't kill the babies or the conception. After the conception, we don't throw away the newly conceived child. All these things are pretty obvious to us. There's a sense to everything and has a context and it has a purpose. So what's the purpose and what's the sense of relations during the menstrual cycle? It does not fulfill the both and. Open to conception, life, and marital relations. Besides the fact that it's potentially rather disgusting. Like, doesn't that kind of obviously, isn't it obvious it could be rather disgusting? I mean, what is wrong with just from the aesthetic standpoint? Let's just look at the aesthetic standpoint, folks. What is wrong with us? Let's control our urges. Let's put aside our desires for a couple of days. Is this a problem for us? We have a problem. Like, don't eat meat on Wednesdays and Fridays. You have a problem with that? Don't have relations during the menstrual cycle. I don't understand why this is problematic for people. Let's control ourselves, please. And then also let's be open to conception. And then when we space relations, it's more meaningful, not less, more beautiful, not less, right? If you eat and drink some food every single day, 5 days a week, you will get sick of it. And this is what we have. We have two extremes, and we see the destruction of the marriage, the beautiful marriage life for Christians who are not well formed when they engage in things that the world is engaged in, thinking this doesn't matter, right? We actually see the destruction of the married state and the unity of the marriage by two extremes, by no continence and no abstinence and no control. So you're constantly having relations and without any self-control, and you're not keeping the fast. During the fast, we pause the relations. Just like we pause eating meat and dairy on the Wednesdays and Fridays. That's a good thing. That'll help us learn self-control. And it keeps the balance. It keeps the royal path in the relations of the couple. Or you go to the other extreme and never have relations, right? There's two extremes. And what happens is if the couple has continual relations, menstrual cycle and all, you will end up after a while, a year or 2 or 5 or 10, having no relations. And we have that. We have the phenomenon of marriages where the man and the woman are totally like strangers. They don't want to have relations because they're so sick of each other. And so you cannot go to those extremes. And I think the idea that we can have relations during the fast and during the menstrual cycle, and it doesn't matter because, hey, we're not bound by the old law. This is just excuses for our passions. We need to control ourselves. I don't know why this should be a no-brainer for anybody who's even a little bit initiated into the ascetic struggles of the saints. And I don't know of any elder who would say, yeah, good idea. Good idea, folks. Have relations night and day if you can. Nobody says that. All right. I think we've answered that. Can I pray to the saints as a catechumen in waiting? And how many saints can we pray to that you recommend? Thank you for the question. So I just want to correct, because there's a misconception among many people, because they think of prayer as only to the Trinity, right? As regarding only the divinity, divine, and not to fellow human beings. Prayer is another way to entreat. It's another word for entreaty, for communication. I pray you. They used to even say in English very often, I pray you. In other words, I ask you or I entreat you. So prayer is generally used for any kind of communication, for any kind of petition, for any kind of entreaty. So it's perfectly acceptable to ask, to entreat, to call upon those who are in the Lord, who are in the land of the living, who are beloved of God. You can entreat them. You can treat them as an Orthodox Christian. You can entreat them as a non-Orthodox Christian or as a catechumen. I don't see why anybody could be against that. So I don't see, no, there's no limit, and there's no limited numbers to my knowledge. I don't know why there would be. There are many who perhaps on their way to Orthodoxy as inquirers have become, have beloved intercessors among the apostles or among the church fathers or great ascetics, and they actually have entreated them to help them to come to the knowledge of truth. And of course they do, and they intercede, because in Christ, all things are possible. And in Christ, all communication happens. The other amazing thing about people who don't understand this mystery of the saints is they think that somehow they have to have omniscience. The saints have to become all-knowing and hear with their own ears, as if they don't have any ears, but because their body is in the grave. So this is a question of a spiritual question, obviously, right? But everything is in God anyway. For the saints who live now and who have the gifts of foreknowledge or clairvoyance, how do they hear or see? In God, in Christ. He is all in all. He does everything. And so there's no boundaries in that sense for God to work or to speak or to communicate or to bring together the saints with the militant church, as it were. And so I don't see any problems in that. Just so we understand, that we're entreating mainly what we should be entreating for. Of course, we everything that's good and necessary, but we should be entreating for self-knowledge, for repentance, for increased love, increased humility. This is the kind of things that a spiritually motivated and oriented man would be entreating for. Of course, there's all things we need. So on our path to Orthodoxy, we can entreat for the knowledge, for the priest, come and catechize me, and all the other things that we need on our path. Treasures of Romanian Christianity, Hesychast Tradition and Culture by Metropolitan Seraphim Iwanda, mentioning St. Paisius' influence over the Romanian monastic life. Are there any similar books? Not that I know of, but that's good to know. That's one more book that we would like to obtain in our little library here. So I appreciate and then we have the Hesychast Paisian tradition still is alive through some of the elders in Romania, such as Elder Macari Beselu, the father of Saint Vasily from Piana Maruli. I'm sure I'm butchering all the names, but I thank you very much for that and for sharing that. It's very nice to know. Please tell us about the Starets of Neamtz that had the vision of the demons trying to destroy the library. I don't know. I heard it for the first time today. I do not know what to tell you. That sounds interesting. Father Filotheu would have to be here with us. I didn't do the interview. I had two choices, just so you know, to do what I did today, which is do the interview this morning and then do the live stream tonight, or do the live stream with the interview at 10 a.m. But I was pretty sure that most of you wouldn't be able to come and be present at a live stream at 10 a.m. in America. And so there'd be very, very few questions anyway, right? So I decided to record the interview and then to do the live stream as usual at 5 p.m. and to field your questions. But I can't answer those that I don't have the answer for. Father Filotheu would have to answer us for that. Father Peter, was it St. Paisius that believed that the teachings of the Holy Fathers would miraculously be preserved in the latter days, as echoed by Father Seraphim Rose? Did you read that? Is that commemorated somewhere, or are you just wondering if he also had the same conviction, or that you're asking, did Father Seraphim Rose get that from St. Paisius? I don't know the answer to that. There is St. Ignati Vryansyaninov, who talks about the writings of the fathers being preserved and being treasured and used in those days. And so you may have that in mind. I think St. Paisius, I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't have any answer. I don't have any experience myself, or haven't read anything where it says St. Paisius believed that teaches the Holy Fathers would be miraculously be preserved. Does anybody know that in the chat? There have been, I think, pretty sure St. Ignati says something like this. St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco talks a little bit about that, as in the end times we'll have the teachings of the fathers. But if anybody has any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it, but I don't know any other saints. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Well, first of all, thank you very much for Nick and gifting 5 memberships to, I can see who they are here. Actually, I've never seen this because I never had the chat in front of me. Mickey, Maximus, Ovelto Jenkins, Victor Carrera, and Jeannie Holezi. I don't know, I'm butchering all the names. Welcome to the Orthodox Ethos, and thank you, Nick, for making that possible. Let's see what else we got here. How should we respond to politicians that abuse their powers to attack the saints of our day? I don't think we're going to respond in a like manner. I don't think that's a Christian way. We're not going to respond in the sense of antagonistically, violently, whether by word or deed, going after them or something. But if they're politicians, certainly we shouldn't support their re-election. And we should pray for them, of course, that they come to repentance. And avoid, any kind of support for such agiomachia, as we would say in Greek, fighters of the saints. In Orthodox countries, we have such men. Of course, pious are not going to support them in any way. I don't know. What else could you do? How could the Orthodox accept the calendar change if it was done without the consensus of the church? Would that make the few bishops who made the change schismatic? Thanks for the question, Maximus. So the Orthodox, let's examine your question. How could the Orthodox accept the calendar change? So there's 2 ways to understand the response to the calendar change. One is that there were many, many people against the calendar change at the time. I think there were many for it as well, because they didn't understand or see it as a change of the Paschalian, because it was not, right? The Paschalian is still the same. So then they were convinced or fooled into thinking that, well, this is not an innovation, this is not a problem. Whatever, I'm not sure. I wasn't there in the 1920s in Greece to poll all the bishops. What were they responding? I haven't read the historical documents to see what the general response was among the hierarchy or whatnot. But for whatever reason, the main error in terms of, in my estimation, of accepting the calendar change, the error rests in its proper ecclesiology. It was anti-ecclesiological. It was anti-Orthodox in terms of ecclesiology. What do I mean? A pan-Orthodox, quote-unquote, pan-Orthodox or worldwide Orthodox unity is expressed not only on the celebration of Pascha and the Paschalian, but it's expressed throughout the year in the celebration of all the feasts. So on a very basic, practical level, such a change should be a change by the entirety of the Orthodox Church, and not piece by piece by piece, piecemeal. Some change, some don't. So the kind of papal leadership at the time, Miletus Metexachis, to do a unilateral change and then kind of push the Greek Church first and so forth and so on, the Romanians eventually, and on down the line, about half of the local Orthodox churches, that whole methodology doesn't sound smart, and it also doesn't sound like an Orthodox way of doing things, right? There would have been patience and consensus instead of a rush to conform to the secular laws and rules and the secular pressure, and then, of course, the pressure from the West. And so there were motivations there, and there was a methodology used, which is clearly not an Orthodox motivation methodology. Metexachis, in particular, is so problematic, as everybody knows who knows the history. I mean, he really is kind of the antithesis of Saint Nectarios, a saint of his day. And so, that's the infiltration of very secularistic, modernistic mindset, if not worse, perhaps the influence of Freemasonry, for example, is a terrible thing that the devil brought in and divided the Orthodox in terms of the ecclesiastical calendar, and changed half of the Orthodox. It's really only about a third or even less. If you actually count the number of Orthodox around the world, the vast majority have not changed the calendar in terms of the celebration of the feasts. So the Orthodox, when they saw these changes, whether they were in the Church of Greece or they were not in the Church of Greece, whatever they were in Romania, many, I believe, to this day, I think this is the case among the traditional-minded Orthodox, even in the Church of Greece, which have been following the new calendar for over a century now, they see it as a terrible mistake in terms of Orthodox unity, but they do not see it as a dogmatic fall. It's not a dogmatic fall, it's an innovation. And it's a departure from holy tradition in terms of, obviously, the calendar itself is a change, but more importantly, in terms of our ecclesiology. And we've suffered for over 100 years now under the influence of a mindset in terms of our ecclesiology, which is foreign to Orthodoxy. This is behind the embrace of humanism in many places, but other innovations as well. So the Orthodox would have disagreed with it, perhaps many of them. Doesn't mean they would have seen it as a defining dogmatic matter in which Canon 15 would then be applicable, or other canons of the church would be applicable, right? So it needs to be rectified. There needs to be a council finally of all the Orthodox to rectify it. That's the only way it will be rectified ever, is when there's an Orthodox council of all the Orthodox churches. So you can become a schismatic in a righteous way, so to speak, right? We have those on the right who've fallen away. For instance, in the Church of Antioch, Paulinus, when Mellitus was in exile, he was elected without really Mellitus ever being dethroned, but he was just exiled. He was elected and he took over, and there was a schism created in the Church of Antioch in the 4th century. He was not doing it for, some kind of heretical minded desire or whatever it might be. He might have been doing it for very good reasons. In fact, he was kind of considered the more traditional, the more conservative of the two, at least by some, not by all the saints. St. Basil and St. John Chrysostom seemed to agree with St. Meletius, but in any case, Pope of Rome embraced him, and they went so far as to not have communion with Meletius because he was seen as weak on certain things. So there are schisms created on the right as well, even when they're correct, but they're not correct in the way they go about it. The way that you respond to heresy is also very, very important, right? Not just that you're right, but that the way you go about correcting it is very, very important. And it shows if you have discernment and you have spiritual wisdom and you go about it. So that's what's going on with the calendar changes. You have a methodological problem with regard to how then to respond to the innovation or to the break of church unity around the calendar. That's another matter entirely, isn't it? And you can definitely become a schismatic and be correct on one level, but very wrong on another level, which is fundamental Orthodox phronema with regard to the criteria for church unity and also how to fight against heresy. Why did the Old Testament give permission for men to have multiple wives? Why does this not apply anymore? What is the reason for the Levirate marriage, and why not necessary anymore? Okay, so I'm just going to answer the first two. I don't know about the second one as much as what you're talking about. So the analogous with the state of mankind, analogous with the covenant, analogous with the spiritual but also social reality of the people, God was a pedagogue. There was a time when that was acceptable, but there's a time when it's not. God determines this by his decrees and his covenants and he brings us slowly, step by step, from the heights of paradise we fell to the depths, and then slowly until with the incarnation and onward we see man going to the heights again and returning not just to paradise but beyond. And so analogous again with the state and the reality of the people and the needs and the revelation that had been given to them, he allowed for a moral code. That was not a permanent decision. That was a pedagogical decision. Does that make sense? That's how I understand it. And as far as why it doesn't apply anymore because the Lord said it's not blessed. He said one wife. And he talked about the hardness of the hearts, why Moses allowed for divorce and all these things. Right there in the scriptures, you'll see the Lord saying, look, you had this from Moses, but because you're weak and hard-hearted, and he's calling people from the old, which was don't commit adultery, don't fornicate, to don't even lust, right? So now he's taking us from what they could handle, what they've been prepared for, what they've been taught, to another level, taking us to a spiritual existence. And so that's, I think, a good part of the answer that you're looking for. Do you believe in the rapture, and do you know about Greek monks' prophecy about the Greek-Turkey conflict? Thanks. No, the rapture is nonsense. It's a heretical teaching. The Orthodox Church Fathers have never taught the rapture. And why would they? Why would we be freed from persecution when the Lord promised it until the end of the days? And this is a misunderstanding of Revelation. It's a misunderstanding of the proper time and place for that to happen. It's not the whole premillennial, postmillennial, the whole Protestant archetype, or whatever you want to call it, the whole Protestant outlook on the end times is messed up. And so then you're led to reinterpret scripture as if there's going to be a rapture before. But the whole idea that there's going to be a 1,000-year reign on earth is wrong. It's a chiliastic heresy that was condemned 1,700 years ago by the church. Chiliasm, the idea of a utopia on earth for 1,000 years with Christ ruling, is rejected by the church for over 1,700 years. So the new dispensationalist vision of the end times is totally innovative, total delusional, and we need to walk and keep far away from it. It has nothing to do with what the church has always taught. Anything that is appearing in the 19th century in America or Europe, it's not the church, and it's never been taught before. It's not the revelation of God. It's not the teaching of the church. You don't even have to examine what they're saying. It cannot be the faith once delivered. It cannot be the same yesterday, today, and forever. It cannot be what Christ has given us. We don't add every so often to the gospel. But let me add to that. Let me create another doctrine. Let me say, 19th century, we're going to talk about now papal infallibility. We're going to talk about immaculate conception. That's not the Orthodox Church, never been. That's not how the church works. For the faith once delivered. So you don't have to get into is the rapture correct? Is it a proper understanding of scripture? You don't have to get into that. It's wrong because no teaching erupted or arrived or was revealed to somebody in England or in France or in America in the 1800s. That's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. So it's, besides the fact that it does not follow the Holy Fathers, it's also not the way it works. Has never been understood like that in 2,000 years. We receive and pass on what we've been given throughout the ages. It's the same faith yesterday, today, and forever. Next. Father, what is your opinion on a husband or father earning money for his family? Should he be modest and earn only what is necessary, or strive for more wealth? He should strive to provide for his family, and if striving to provide for his family, there is a greater intake of income and a greater success, he should turn around and make sure that money is used wisely for the benefit of the family, for the benefit of the church, for the benefit of the community. and not be a miser and a greedy guy who's building castles in the sky, right? So take care of your family, whatever that means. It might mean a large expenditure, small expenditure. The number is not that important. It's the principle that you're keeping to. You're being chaste, as it were, with the use of your money, right? You're not blowing it on all these secondary things. You give them what they need. You provide for their health, their welfare, their future, but with modesty, right? I can't get into all the details. That's why you have a spiritual father, and he guides you step by step. But obviously, if you building mansions and having 10 cars and all that, you're not modest. You're not chaste, and you're not using the money as God sees fit. He says, "I'll give you what you need." And so when you, as St. John Chrysostom talks about again and again, when you give the excess for your neighbor, for the church, for Christ, right, who's in need, you're investing in heaven. You're building mansions in heaven for you and your family as well, because that's blessing is going to come back upon you and your children and grandchildren. So you work, but with that kind of outlook. It's not. I'm not going to give it. Don't earn a ton of money. You don't set out to get I'm going to become a rich man. I'm going to make millions. I think that's problematic. No, I'm going to work hard to provide for my family. If I do very well and I'm successful, glory to God. If not, I can trust that God will give me what I need, and that's the promise. And His word is truth. When we do His will, He will give us what we need. When we seek the kingdom of heaven first, all else shall be added unto us. That's the word of truth. That's immutable, absolutely true, trustworthy. And if we work and live like that, we have nothing to worry about. And if millions are brought in, then millions will be like the saints passed out, to children, but also to people outside the family. If you want to bless your family, give to those who have need. That's how you bless the children. They will have great spiritual benefit and protection from God. And that virtue will be passed on to them, which is more valuable than all the money in the world, right? Father, what's your opinion on receiving communion frequently versus rarely, and why? I'll answer you like St. Paisius answered St. Cleopa when he visited, or St. John Chrysostom answered, and that is, there is no set number. There is no set number. Let me ask you, I'll bring up what St. Paisius said with some minor change to encompass our situation here, so to speak, and also the teachings of other Athenites. But let me actually share with you. I'm going to find it first, or is it? Maybe I didn't. Where did I share it? No, I didn't share it there. That's why I'm not finding it. 1 second. This is worthy. This is worth our time. Hang on a second. Yes, here it is. St. Paisius met St. Cleopa. You know what? This also brings to mind, since we have almost 600 of you here, in about 5 minutes, I'll make a big announcement. We'll make the first big announcement right here on this live stream. So you guys are going to get the first. You hear it first. I was going to do it more formally in a post. I'll do that as well. But since we're thinking about it and talking about it, I'll actually make a verbal announcement first in about 5 minutes. So stay tuned if you're interested in that news. So he says, St. Cleopa says to St. Paisius, and it's a great article on iconandlight.wordpress.com. It's from the life of St. Cleopa. And St. Cleopa asks, Father Paisius, how many times must we partake of Holy Communion per year? So there was a big discussion, still is in the Romanian church, between frequent communion proponents and people who are more not frequent communion, like once a week, once a month, depends on your lifestyle. And so I think that's probably why St. Cleopa was asking. So St. Paisius doesn't respond by saying, well, once a month or once every week or 5 times a year or any of that, right? He responds, not unlike St. John Chrysostom, by saying, it depends. The promptings of the heart and our spiritual father indicate us how many times. The prompting of our hearts and the spiritual father. Of course, I could add to that, which I think St. Paisius would definitely agree. He's assuming, because he's talking to Romanian monks, he's not talking to catechumens or inquirers in America. He's assuming a lot of things, and we have to add those because we know from other writings that he would say the same thing. And that is, the assumption here is that you're living a robust spiritual life in the church. You're fasting with the church. You're praying your prayer rule. You're praying prayers before communion, right? And you're approaching after fasting. We know from the life of St. Paisius that he was on Sinai, a great ascetic, of course. So remember the context. This is not your parish down the street or something, right? This is Sinai, Mount Sinai, the great ascetic and austere life that he led there. But nonetheless, he was there, and was looking for a spiritual father to confess, and he was looking to commune on Sunday. He wasn't able to find that spiritual father, if I remember the story correctly. But in any case, he ended up eating oil on Saturday. Not meat, not dairy, oil, like some olive oil. I think he put on his meal, his salad or whatever he was eating. And when he found the spiritual father in the evening or in the morning, the spiritual father said, "Oh, you had oil yesterday? No, you shouldn't commune." So that they were very, very strict. Like, most people don't understand that on Athos and in places like the ascetic places of the Orthodox Church, you don't just to commune on Sunday, you're fasting on Saturday. Now, you don't fast from oil in most places. That's maybe only on Sinai or in places of the desert of Athos, but you're preparing for Holy Communion with fasting. So I think that St. Paisius in the old school would say that, yes, you can commune often, but you got to have a very robust spiritual life to do that. So in any case, he says, there's no number. It's promptings of your heart and spiritual father indicates this to us. You have a spiritual father, you have a confessor, you have a spiritual guide. He's going to say for you and your lifestyle and your way, once a month or once every Sunday or whatever it might be. He says, going on, some more often, others less often. St. Paisius. If monastics can commune once a week, it is very good. He says, for monastics, see, it's according to the life. It's according to the struggle. Generally speaking, monastics, if they can, it doesn't say they must or they should, if they can, every week. Lay people, less frequently, and in accordance to what their spiritual fathers decide. All right? So that's St. Paisius responding to St. Cleopa. It was Cleopa asking on the behalf of the pilgrims from Romania who went to see the great St. Paisius. All right. That should answer your question. I hope. Hey, Father Peter, God bless. God bless. Normally, we don't say God bless to a priest, just so you know. Orthodox piety, Orthodox, what's the word? There's a word, actually. I'm getting too old. Etiquette. Orthodox etiquette, spiritual etiquette is that to a priest, you don't say God bless you. You never hear that in Greece. A layman doesn't say that because he doesn't feel that he's in the position to do that. The priest blesses. The priest is blessing on the part of Christ. He's bringing the blessing of Christ to the people. So you would say to a priest, not something, you'd say something else, like good evening, your blessing. That's how you would reach out to a priest. You wouldn't say God bless you to the priest. Just so you know. I'm interested in the Certificate of Theology Studies, independent study at Jordanville. Is there a minimum time I need to be active in the church? And if yes, how much? I think that depends on the study. It's on the program itself. So I think you need to direct your question to Father Ephraim there, or Bishop Luke, or Father Cyprian, whoever it is there at the Jordanville who's in charge of that. And they'll tell you if they have some minimum requirement. I don't think so, but it may have changed. They may have a 1 or 2 year requirement. And I know that's happening in some places. They want people just to live a simple parish life before they start studying theology. Now, that applies certainly for people going to seminary to become clergy. I don't think that anyone who just came in the church should be doing that. They should be waiting a couple of years before they get up and move. And of course, they need a blessing of the bishop and the spiritual father to do it anyway. But you need to live the life of the church before you start learning how to teach the people and perform the mysteries. That's really basic. And we have great needs today. And so there's going to be a temptation for us to quickly ordain. But the apostle is very clear that that's not a good idea. We should not do that. So if that's the case, we shouldn't try to push the church for us to get ordained quickly either. It's a bad idea for a lot of reasons. So it's good you're asking. Ask the fathers at Jordanville. They'll be able to give you a better answer for what they're requesting. But since it's an online independent study, something tells me it's going to be less stringent, and maybe you can do it. Are there any writings from Neamtz Monastery? Newell, what does that mean? In today, Rep of Moldavia that we know of that have not been published yet? How it was created? I don't know. I don't know the history or how it was created. I'm sorry, I'm pleading ignorance. And I don't know if there's unpublished writings today. I'm assuming you're saying unpublished writings of fathers of the monastery? No, don't know. I did not ask him about, besides St. Paisius, obviously. All right, we talked about St. Paisius' writings, and they're in the library, and there are some works that he published, or this particular treatise that I'm talking about. It's commemorated in this book as having been translated into Romania and circulated. And both St. Paisius and Volismas were very happy with the results of that publication. So that is for sure something that is still unpublished, to my knowledge, does not exist in Romanian, and existed at one point. And I think Father is saying that he had not seen that yet in all of his research, which is unsettling. We have it in Greek, so it can be translated from the Greek, so it's not the end of the world. But it's unsettling that the text is not found today. Should be somewhere, some library. But how can the church be divided, though? Is that normal? The church divided? The church isn't divided. I never said the church is divided. When did I say the church was divided? I'm not sure how you got that. People who are in schism are in schism. What does schism mean? They're separated. That's what the word means. They're not in the church. They're not in communion with the church anymore. They're in schism. So divided in the sense of liturgical unity, right? That they're not celebrating the feast on the same day. That is not a division of the church. It's a division in terms of liturgical practice. That's a division of practical liturgical unity. That's not a division of the body of Christ. We're not out of communion. We're all Orthodox. It's a innovation that should be changed. It doesn't mean you cease to be Orthodox because there's a bad decision by some bishops in Constantinople. All the church is now thrown up and we're all unorthodox magically. No, that doesn't happen. For instance, a great example is the newly glorified Saint Dionysius of Colțu. He was a Romanian monk who in 1927, I think, 28, he left Romania because of the calendar change. He didn't want to be a part of the calendar change. So he went to Mount Athos. And he stayed on Mount Athos, of course, he was like 90 something when he reposed. So 70, 80 years he was on Mount Athos. He's now been glorified by the Ecumenical Patriarchate. He was a Romanian elder. I had the blessing to meet him in 1996 and sit and talk to him for hours in his little cell. That was a great blessing. But he did not commemorate for most of his life the Ecumenical Patriarch. He ceased commemoration. He did not become a zealot. He did not go to the old calendarists, but he did not commemorate the Patriarch until very late in his life. I'm not even sure exactly how and when that happened. I heard that at the end of his life, he did commemorate, but I don't know. Maybe he never commemorated. In any case, I think he did, though, at the end. In any case, for the vast majority of his life, he did not commemorate. He did not support the calendar change, and he did not want to see it. He wanted to see it reversed. but he did not go into schism over it. He did not leave the church. So this is the discernment of the fathers, right? Resist on matters that are questions of innovation. When you have an outright teaching of heresy, that's a different category. We can talk about that if that's something you want to talk about, but that's a different category, a different response, and there are different bases for our response to heresy. Dionysio Romano is the Mason father was referring to. You have to go back and hear if he actually said the name. I think he did, and that does sound familiar. But go back and listen to the interview. I don't remember. Father, I see different views on Genesis in the church. Is there one correct way I must believe regarding the age of the earth or evolution? First of all, anybody who believes in evolution is far from an Orthodox cosmology, but also just not very bright because it's so tendacious. Evolution is extremely tendacious. I saw a video recently of a black evangelical man who's a scholar. I mean, he's not Orthodox. He doesn't have the Orthodox tradition and understanding, and yet he just blew it out of the water. Like, I can't remember all the details he said, but he made it on a scientific basis sound so ridiculous. But on a spiritual, dogmatic, cosmological basis, it's impossible for the Orthodox or any Christian to entertain the idea of evolution. So I would say you cannot, if you want to be an Orthodox Christian and follow the fathers, right? Fortunately, this is not a dogmatic question that the church has approached and spoken on in council. That might happen. I hope it does. So we can't say that the church has spoken, on the level of an ecumenical council or something. But the saints are all against evolution. You can read Father Seraphim Rose's latest edition, especially, that just came out a few months ago from St. Herman of Alaska Press. Read his book, Genesis, Creation, Early Man. And the new edition, I think, is all these appendices where he adds in all the saints, including recent glorified saints, and their opinion or their statements on evolution. Nobody accepts the idea that we're from apes. Nobody accepts the idea that the world is millions of years old. Nobody accepts the idea. You can't reconcile it with our cosmology and the understanding of the creation of man. The fall of man brought the corruption into the world. There wasn't a million years of corruption and slow creation of a man, and then he fell, and all of the creation was corrupted. It was already corrupt. In the evolutionist old earth version of things, we have millions of years of corruption before paradise. It's impossible to reconcile, and it's off. And besides, as Father Seraphim Rose says, science as a whole cannot understand the pre-fall state, right? It cannot understand what Adam and Eve were living. It doesn't. It's not something they can verify and examine. It doesn't exist. The pre-fall state, right? They can't put their scientific empirical knowledge to work. So they're necessarily going to be ignorant of the state of the world before the fall. And so what are we talking about here? So yes, as an Orthodox Christian, we're young earth, 100%. And we're not going to buy into the very foolish and ridiculous theories of the evolutionists, which are incompatible to our theology, our cosmology, but also cannot stand up against any serious scrutiny in the realm of science on basic things. The things they state are impossible to accept, even on a scientific basis. I wish I could call to mind the points the man made, but you can find this stuff. It's all over the place, all over the internet. These kind of things that just with simple logic show that what Darwin and all the rest of them that followed his thinking, what they're doing is a philosophy. What they're doing is speculating. What they're doing is not science. It's not science. In terms of origins of the world, right? In terms of species and them being transformed from one to another and all this. This is all speculation. There's no scientific basis for it. Just to share, if it hasn't already been, there was a monastery in Arizona dedicated to St. Paisios in Safford, most usually English. Yes, indeed, not far from us, 3 hours from us. To the north, there is the St. Paisios Velichkovsky monastery of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. And It's a beautiful place. You should visit it. Filled with wonderful American struggling sisters. As I mentioned before, our priest has been unfairly dismissed due to an unsubstantiated slander by a certain faction. Our church has been closed down during Great Lent. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. You ask, everything that has happened, most of all, lack of transparency is making me lose my trust in our Archbishop. What should we do? I don't think I can answer that because I don't know the details at all of the case. So the scriptures are pretty clear. If you got something against your brother, you go to him face to face. You bring another. So if you've not done that with the Archbishop, then you should do that. That's how the Lord has directed us to deal with these kind of very, problematic issues. Father, when will the Akathis or Canon of St. Joseph the Hesychast be released? We have not begun that. It's not one of our projects right now, so I don't know. It's a desire on our part, but we are understaffed and overworked, and there's many other projects that we've committed to already. So I think maybe that's already been undertaken by others, though. In fact, now to come to think of it, has it not been undertaken by the fathers down in Florida? Somebody there? Check that out. Maybe that's already in the works down in the monastery in Florida. Are the Orthodox allowed to eat halal meat? I've had the question before, and because in our part of the world, halal meat is really not an issue. It's hard for me to answer, and I have a lot of personal pastoral experience. But so this is meat. Just so people don't know, halal meat is the Muslim preparation, right? It's Islamic dietary laws defined in the Quran. So permissible animals, cattle, poultry, sheep, they must not be pork or alcohol related and be slaughtered by a swift humane cut to the throat by a Muslim reciting a dedication ensuring complete blood drainage. So not unlike some similarity to kosher, like the Jewish way of doing things, not total though. And, supposedly cleaner. But I think you're not getting to the actual physical way it's done. You're probably saying the spiritual aspect. You have some kind of imam or something that's reciting a prayer as he's doing it, right? Or whatever he's doing. I don't think, from what I understand, I don't think there's a problem to eat that. It's not like you're necessarily, it's not being offered to idols. It's just a way that they do it. They say their prayers, whatever, but there's a lot of other things that are going on in the meat market that's probably very bad and worse than this. But in terms of the spiritual, I don't see how we would be culpable for whatever they're saying while they cut the meat. So I don't know. I don't see the, if Paul says that in a way, only not to scandalize, we avoid this. There's not an implication that we're somehow embracing idolatry or whatever, but he says, nonetheless, don't do it, don't scandalize your brother, etc. But so I don't think there's some spiritual obstacle. So somebody else here says halal is cruel because in slaughter they are not to completely sever the spinal cord. So the animal feels continued pain until it bleeds to death. Also, they invoke the name of Allah. That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. I don't know. I don't even eat meat, so I don't know what to tell you. I've never heard anybody say no. I've never heard any bishop or church or forbid it or anything like that. So I can't say, yeah, absolutely. Orthodox say, if you want to avoid it, avoid it. If you have any thoughts, it bothers your conscience, avoid it. But I don't have any strong no from anybody that I know of. So you guys are up in Montreal. Caesar, you're probably around a lot more Muslims than we are down here in Arizona. I think Caesar has the best thing here. Do the sign of the cross over all the foods. You don't even know what all the foods you think are healthy and good. There's a lot of evidence saying that there's a lot of problems with all of our foods. So, St. Paisius famously said during the Chernobyl incident, where there was fear that all of the food down in southern the Balkans was being contaminated, because it took many, many days of this contamination. And he said, look, make the sign of the cross and eat. That was his response to the terrible contamination that people were fearing in his day. So pray over your food, make the sign of the cross. If your conscience bothers you, don't eat it. But I can't say again that there's something hard, fast, no, that I'm aware of. Could you name some Orthodox saints of England and Germany before the 11th century schism and Reformation? I'd like to research their life. Well, easy to find. It's very easy to find. Just do a search online. But obviously, some of the greatest saints: Saint Patrick, Saint Columba, Saint Aidan, Saint Augustine of Canterbury, Saint Alban, the proto-martyr. There's so many ascetics in Ireland: Finian and Bridget and Brendan, the Navigator. I mean, there are many saints in the British Isles. Very easy to find. Just do a search. In Germany, less so that come to mind right now. But if you go to the Orthodox Synaxarion, of course, Martin of Tours. I mean, there's tons of great Western saints in the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries. And Cassian, St. John Cassian, of course, but St. Irenae, but if you go further on in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th centuries, it gets a little more obscure. And I think what you want to do is, in the Synaxarion from Ormelia, the 5 or 6 volumes from Ormelia, the monastery that Father Macarius edited. In there, they have at the end of each day, they have the section for the Western saints, and there they very clearly every day you can read about the Western saints of that day. So we're also working on a publication, which I think will be very beneficial for all of you, and that is the Saints of the British Isles, a Synaxarion, hopefully 12 volume, but it'll take many years to get out, but that's something we're working on. Now, I did promise all of you a big announcement. Should I do that now? Is that the best time to do it? Is everybody ready before they go to bed? Do you want to hear the big announcement? I don't know. And then I'm going to put it out on the internet in a post here momentarily, once I get off, if I can do it. So we do have a bunch of questions here still to go. People are pouring in their questions still, but maybe I'll take a moment here to announce that after much prayer and the blessing of our bishop, we are happy to announce that he has determined that here in Arizona, there was, of course, we're going back and forth. We were talking about starting a mission in Texas. We had met with people there, south of Austin. But finally, we will be starting a mission here, not far from St. Anthony's Monastery, in the Santan, Coolidge, Santan, Queen Creek area. We're not quite sure exactly the location, but it's going to be most likely in the Santan Valley area. We've got over 100 people already who want to start this mission. And so we'll be staying right here in Arizona, Father Peter and his family. And this week, we got the blessing to start the mission. And the names of the saints for the mission have been announced. I haven't even announced this to the community. I've got to get this out to the community, but I'll announce it to all of you tonight, and I'm sure it'll spread like wildfire, like every time it does. We will be dedicating, in fact, I'll show you an image here. I think it's interesting. Hang on. We'll be dedicating the church to 2 saints. And let me see if I can get it here. Where is it? I had found it earlier, an article, and I wanted to to find it again for you. Interesting. I guess I only have a video to show you then. I thought I had it. Anyway, we'll just show this. How's this sound? Why doesn't it come up? Maybe this is it. So these two saints met at one point. I want to show you the picture of them meeting, because that's who we're going to dedicate the church to. We're going to dedicate to these two saints, and we're kind of excited about it. But I want to actually show you the image of them together. And I can't, for the life of me, get there. That's interesting. We'll find it though. Where did it go? Oh, I know I can find it. Hang on. It's right here. All right. So we are starting the mission, just to repeat again. It's going to be in Arizona. And it's going to be in Santan Valley. And for the life of me, I can't find it. Interesting. We'll find it though. I want to show you this. I don't want to just throw it out there. I want to actually show you the page. That's the exciting part. Here we go. This is the page. Here we go. Here we go. I'll get it out. All right. Yeah. So we're dedicating the chapel, the church, to these two saints right here. You ready? All right. Saint Cleopa and Saint Paisius of the Holy Mountain. Saint Cleopa of Romania and Saint Paisius. That will be the name of the church that we will be opening up here in Santan area. We're beginning our services. Here's the picture of them together when they met in 77, it looks like, was this meeting. And this is when the fathers were there. I read to you earlier tonight how St. Paisius was talking with St. Cleopa, and they St. Cleopa was asking him on behalf of the pilgrims there. Let me see here's some images of their meeting when they were together. Here it is. You can see here, right? They were meeting together, St. Cleopa and St. Paisius. So that will be the name of our mission going forward. So pray for us as we get started. We'll have services beginning on Palm Sunday. If anybody's in the Arizona area and wants to join us, for the time being, services will be down near the monastery, but eventually we'll be moving up to Santan in due time. So that's the big news on our end. After a long exile, things are coming to fruition. All right, let's go back to your questions, and happy to answer the rest of your questions here before we close it out. We are way over time, but it was a long interview with Father Filotheu. Okay, actually, there's only one more question. I thought there were more. Are there any Orthodox cosmologists or astronomers who you would recommend looking into? That's a great question. Nothing comes to mind. I'm not really, when you say cosmologist, I mean, when we talk about cosmology, it's a theological, right? Orthodox cosmology is really not about the physical world as much as, I mean, like scientifically examining the physical world as it is a theological question, right? So nobody comes to mind right now in terms of the physical world. So can't help you on that. Nobody comes to mind. Yeah. Astronomers, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there are many Orthodox astronomers. Obviously, they'd probably be Greek or Russian. I'm sure in Russia they have all of that. It's a very large country with a lot of people, in Romania. But I don't, in English Orthodox who are well known in this field, nothing comes to mind. Morta, as Caesar says here. Patience, patience, patience. Yes. So any other questions? Did we star the other questions here? I see a question here that are a couple questions that aren't starred. Do we want to do that? Do we want to answer those, or are we just going to move on? As I see here, somebody is asking. Let's put it on the screen here. So you have to be a young earth creationist to be an Orthodox Christian. How do we reconcile our faith with scientific evidence like fossils? Read Father Seraphim Rose, Genesis, Creation, Early Man. And if you're really interested in that topic, he'll answer that for you. I don't say you have to be like it's we're going to be kicking you out of the church, but it's totally untenable from an Orthodox perspective to support evolution. That's what I know, and the saints don't embrace it. So you can struggle with it, you can deal with it, you can be an Orthodox Christian and struggle with your salvation, but you will not find Orthodox saints who will embrace the evolutionary worldview. Doesn't exist. And then if you want to come to terms with it, you can read their writings. And that's why this book, Genesis, Creation, Early Man, is so wonderful, because it's correct. He's not only got Father Seraphim's many reflections and beautiful, writings, but he has many saints. He's got a whole section dedicated to all the saints talking about it. So check it out. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your comments, your congratulations, and your best wishes. Thank you. I appreciate that. Keep us in your prayers. Another question is, how do you raise a family around a monastery? Just like you raise a family around a parish, except that you, in the monastery setting, if you're going and attending a monastery, it's not going to be like a parish in every way, obviously. So I do recommend, people should go to monasteries as often as they want and can, but it is, especially for young families with children, it's very important that they have a catechetical communal center, right? And the monastery is not meant to be a center of catechism in that sense, right? They don't do social/catechetical work, or they shouldn't, if they're following the hesychastic tradition. So attending the monasteries, getting so much from the divine services and from the wisdom of the fathers is wonderful. And we should do it no matter what. If you live next to the monastery, take advantage of it, but also try to also participate in a parish if it's possible nearby, because you're going to gain much by giving. You're going to gain much by the catechetical program, hopefully, of the parish. You're going to gain much by the proper Orthodox Christian social life, that should be going on there. So that would be my answer for you there. Father Peter, very good to hear your new ministry. I'm wondering if this new ministry is in English or Greek. The overwhelming percentage will be English, but we'll use Greek as well. Maybe 75-25, 70-30. It'll depend on the services and the people, but generally it's going to be a missionary outreach. So English will be the predominant language in the parish, although we have a lot of Greek speakers as well. So we'll balance it and make everybody as happy as possible. So you have to be a young earth. We've already answered that. Let's see. Do we have any other things? No. We answered that. Any last questions before we sign off? This is the first book you published, Father Peter. What is the first book I published? Please, what is the first book? But the first book I ever published was The Truth of Our Faith, if that's what you're referring to. Yes. Saint Cleopa life. No, we have not published the life of Saint Cleopa. We published the Truth of Our Faith and a short life at the beginning of that, back in 2001. That's when we published that. It's a great book, hugely important for the people who are coming into the church from the Protestant background. We're going to miss the people in Texas, and I still intend to go out there and see them as much as I am able, because I began to be very concerned and drawn to them, the people that I was meeting with. So it was very hard going back and forth, not only physically, but I mean, it was hard in my heart to see this happening. And it developed over time. It wasn't something I expected, actually. We had pretty much resigned ourselves that we would be going to Texas. And we said, let it be blessed. It's God's will. But then a group of people really rose up, petitioned the bishop, had a meeting here, big turnout, and then the bishop sent a representative, and they had even a bigger turnout for that. And the bishop thought it was best that I stay and care for these people. I did have a parish here in Arizona in the past, right? That's the last parish I had was right here in this same place. So a lot of these same people are here, and they wanted me to start basically up again. And so it was very hard, frankly, to make the decision. But I didn't really make the decision. The bishop ultimately made the decision. We said, let it be blessed. We saw that there was a lot to be said to stay. I mean, I thought that God's hand was here. And so we will miss Texas. We will miss Texas. It's true. Question in Crowdcast, if I have time. All right, in Crowdcast we have, if the saints teach us that holy things cannot cause disease, and if they teach us that even the dirt and the dust off the icons and the floor excuse me, the icons in the floor is holy, that's St. Gabriel said that, then does that mean that we will not become ill from breathing the dirt and the dust during church building renovations and repairs? I don't think we should become super literal on the words of the saints, right? They're experiencing a spiritual reality that we probably don't experience, and they're talking about it. So how literal can you get if you have building materials that are poisonous? Obviously, avoid that, right? I don't think the saint is giving a carte blanche. Let's start eating the paint from the walls or something. This is not what he's saying. But make the sign of the cross and trust God. If you was breathing in the dirt and the dust, I don't know. These are not scientific statements that the saints aren't making. Like every last piece of dust is like eating manna from heaven. We shouldn't go overboard. For those who are prayerful and fear God, there's no fear. I think that's what he's saying, in terms of the Orthodox approach to these things, that in the holy place, we have the protection of God. So when people were saying, some certain theologians were saying, even in the holy chalice, there is, nature, and nature's, fallen, and therefore there could be viruses in the cup or whatever. The people who were writing that back in COVID days are totally missing the point. Of course, yes, we understand that the world is filled with microbes and viruses and all the rest, or whatever it is. The bacteria is a better word. But the order of nature is overcome in the incarnation. And in the chalice, we have the continuation of the incarnation. We have the mystery of the incarnation. And so whatever is going on in the chalice, it's not going to be it's not overcoming the will of God and the incarnational regeneration of the world, right? So it's just foolish to say that reality is overcoming the divine human communion that God has given to us through it. So make the sign of the cross and nothing will happen, is according to the scripture. It says in scripture right there, don't worry, you'll be protected. That's what you're getting to. But it's not a super scientific analysis of these things. It's saying trust God. That's what we're saying. Trust God, because he is, through this created means, he's giving us uncreated life. He's redeeming it all, and it's offered up to God, and so we have nothing to worry about. Does this also mean that we will not experience illness or skin irritation from drinking and anointing themselves with petroleum, paraffin, lamp oil. No, don't. This is, yeah, I think I've already answered this. Yeah. I think we need to not try to overanalyze it and just use our common sense. Use our common sense, and also at the same time trust God. These two things go together. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Well, actually, I do. Just as I say it, in some other country there is a persecution. Somebody wants to find a country where it is safer to be Orthodox. What would you recommend? What country to go to be Orthodox? I mean, there's a lot of Orthodox countries to choose from. There's Georgia, there's Romania, there's Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Russia. If you want to go to an Orthodox country, they're pretty obvious. You can go to those places, and I think you'll be safe. Yeah. Father, can you talk more on a man's role in marriage and a woman's role? I can, but not right now. After 3 hours and 25 minutes, I'm gonna wrap it up. And if there are any really simple questions to answer, I'll do that. But I'm not going to get into a big presentation. We have talked about those things in the past, so maybe you can find some of those online. Is there something? We've already answered that. Let's see. Is this anything? Yeah, we just did that. All right. So I don't see any other further questions unless we're missing them. But it is way over our normal time. Thank you for joining us tonight. We will be announcing very soon the program for April, but we always take off Holy Week and Bright Week. I may come back on the Thursday of Bright Week just because I won't be, it'll be quite a big time period before we get back together. And so check out our announcements in terms of our next live streaming, but we won't be live streaming next week at all. And then tomorrow night we're not live streaming. So, but we may come back and live stream on the Bright Thursday, God willing. We'll see. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful, blessed Holy Week. I hope you have a blessed Pascha, and keep us in your prayers as we begin our new journey here with the parish of Saint Paisius and Cleopa, Saints Paisius and Cleopa here in Arizona. God bless everybody. Good night, good struggles, and Kalia Nasasi, good resurrection.
See